Chapter 792. Emperor Qing's arrival. Qing Yi was tall and sturdy with a resolute face. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes. At first glance, he looked like a simple and honest man with an innocent face. If one was deceived by Qing Yi's appearance, one would suffer greatly. After all, Qing Yi was the leader of the 4 great Azure Dragon Guards. His strength was far greater than the other 3 Azure Dragon Guards. Regardless of strength or methods, he was extremely outstanding. His simple and honest appearance was only a disguise. Half an incense stick's worth of time has already passed. Qing Er, Qing San, and Qing Si should have completely captured Zhuo by now. Qing Yi walked side by side with Qing Yan as he spoke indifferently. Thus, with the 3 of them, Yuan won't be able to escape no matter how powerful he is. Qing Yan nodded with a trace of anticipation in his eyes. If Zhuan was really captured alive, as long as he didn't kill Zhuan, he could torture him however he wanted. Soon, the 2 of them arrived at the open space. However, when they landed on the open space, they were stunned. This was because Qing Er, Qing San, and Qing Si were all lying on the ground, motionless and silent. Moreover, what shocked Qing Yan and Qing even more was that there was a hole on the other side of the open space. There was also a figure lying in the hole. This person was lying on his back, and his back was empty. His heart had been dug out. Qing Yan was naturally familiar with this person. It was their target, Qing. In other words, Qing Er, Qing San, Qing Si, and even Zhuan were all dead. What's going on? Instantly, Qing Yan and Qing Yi locked their cold gazes on the open space. Su Ling Tian was still standing, and Zhu Qi was trembling. Su Ling Tian hurriedly crawled over to Qing Yan. He was in a sorry state, and his eyes were filled with fear. He hurriedly said, "Lord Qing Yan is too heaven-defying. Although he only has the strength of a half-step into the Xuanzuan realm, the strength he displayed is already comparable to an early-stage sovereign." Lord Qing Si was the first to arrive here. He didn't expect Zhuan to be so strong. He was actually attacked by him and died just like that. Later, Qing Er and Qing San rushed over. When they saw Lord Qing Si die, they were furious and joined forces to besiege Zhuan. However, this Zhuan was really amazing. He actually transformed into a 4-headed, 8-armed form and displayed terrifying mental energy. He perished together with the 2 lords. Qing Yan's eyes narrowed, and his expression became increasingly cold. He suddenly stared fixedly at Su Ling Tian and said, "Perish together? When they were fighting, why didn't you help?" Su Ling Tian's eyes, Su Ling Tian's of Qing, and Qing San. Qing was, Su Ling and Qing Er and Qing San told me not to help. So, Qing and Qing Er and Qing San didn't. As he spoke, Su Ling Tian pointed at Zhu Qi behind him with his right hand and spoke in a rather flustered manner. Qing Yan's gaze converged on Zhu Qi as he asked coldly. Zhu Qi's entire body trembled, and his teeth chattered. Thinking of Su Ling Tian's instructions, he gritted his teeth and said, "It is indeed as this lord said. Zhuan and the 3 Azure Dragon Guards perished together." Rumble. Qing Yan's eyes were cold. He suddenly stretched out his right hand, and a terrifying azure energy surged out. It turned into a huge dragon claw and crushed down. "No! Don't kill me!" The dragon claw instantly smashed onto Zhu Qi's body. Immediately, blood splattered everywhere. Under the power of the dragon claw, Zhu Qi turned into a bloody mist. Seeing Qing Yan's merciless attack, Su Ling Tian's pupils shrank. Qing Yan's actions clearly showed that he didn't believe Zhu Qi's words at all. "Are you willing to become an Azure Dragon Guard?" Clapping his hands, Qing Yan's gaze converged on Su Ling Tian. His actions had already shown that he didn't believe such words at all. However, Qing Yan didn't intend to pursue the matter, nor did he ask for an answer. Instead, he asked Su Ling Tian if he was willing to become an Azure Dragon Guard. Su Ling Tian's eyes flickered. At this moment, he could clearly feel that Qing Yi, who was beside Qing Yan, was constantly gathering his aura. He knew that if he wasn't willing, Qing Yi would immediately capture or even kill him. Although Su Ling Tian was a heavenly venerate, his cultivation had dropped too much. He was only at the early stage of the sovereign stage. A cultivator like Qing Yi could be destroyed with a wave of his hand in the past. However, he was no match for Qing Yi now. Fighting with Qing Yi was undoubtedly an unwise decision. "I'm willing." In the end, Su Ling Tian compromised. He knew that this was Qing Yan giving him a chance to live. At the same time, it was also a chance for him to serve the Blue Dragon Hall. "Good. Since you agree, then you are a member of the Azure Dragon Guard from now on. Welcome to the Blue Dragon Hall. From now on, your code name will be Qing Wu." Qing Yi suddenly laughed heartily. His simple and honest face was filled with a harmless smile, giving people a good impression of him. However, if one thought that Qing Yi was simple and honest because of his appearance, then they would suffer a great loss. After all, it was impossible for Qing Yi to become the leader of the Azure Dragon Guard without any tricks. Su Ling Tian forced a smile, but his gaze was extremely gloomy. This was far from what he had planned. Originally, he had planned to use mutual destruction as an excuse to get away from the Blue Dragon Hall's suspicion. At that time, he wouldn't need to be wanted by the Blue Dragon Hall and could go wherever he wanted. But now, Qing Yan's suspicion had completely disrupted Su Ling Tian's plan, forcing him to join the Blue Dragon Hall. Although Su Ling Tian hadn't expected this situation, it wasn't bad. At this time, Su Ling Tian was planning to completely leave the Blue Dragon Hall after he completely recovered his strength as an Empyrean. Even Aoki wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Thinking of this, Su Ling Tian's heart relaxed a lot as he silently stood beside Qing Yan. "Lord Qing Yan, Juan is dead. What should we do now?" Qing Yi asked hesitantly. "Bring him back. After all, this child has a dragon soul and his physical body is extremely powerful. Bring him back first. We can only leave him to the Hall Master to decide," Qing Yan said helplessly. Although Qing Yan also hoped that Juan would die, this time, Aoki had specifically instructed that Juan must be captured alive. But now, it seemed that capturing him alive wasn't very possible. Qing Yi nodded and took a step forward. Just as he was about to carry the motionless Juan in the pit, a green light suddenly swept over and wrapped around Juan like a maggot. "Who is it?" Qing Yi was shocked and felt a chill down his spine. He hurriedly took a few steps back. The green light came silently and he didn't notice at all. If someone attacked him with such a method, he was afraid that he would be in trouble. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 air-piercing sounds could be heard as 3 silhouettes appeared from the distant horizon. The one in the lead was a middle-aged man dressed in a green robe. The robe had a lifelike dragon embroidered on it, just like a real dragon. "Your Majesty Emperor Qing?" Looking at the middle-aged man in a luxurious robe with a dignified appearance, Qing Yan, Su Ling Tian and Qing Yi were shocked and hurriedly cupped their hands and bowed. Emperor Qing's gaze was calm. The 2 people standing beside him were none other than Grand Haohai and Grand Baihe, father and daughter. After seeing Grand Haohai and his daughter, how could Qing Yan not know that Emperor Qing's arrival was related to these 2 people? This Grand Haohai is really cunning. Not only did he inform the Azure Dragon Palace, he even informed the Azure Emperor. It's a pity that Zhuan is already dead. He's completely worthless. Qing Yan lowered his head slightly, but his mind was active. This Zhuan is dead? Emperor Qing frowned as he looked at the motionless Zhuan wrapped in the green light. He naturally also noticed that Zhuan's back was empty. His heart was actually gone. Obviously, it was dug out by someone. Originally, we were ordered by the Hall Master to capture Zhun. Unfortunately, this boy was arrogant and unruly and didn't care about the Blue Dragon Hall. So, we taught him a lesson. However, our Blue Dragon Hall also suffered a great loss. Except for Qing Yi, the other 3 of the 4 great Azure Dragon Guards are all dead. At this point, Qing Yan's face turned slightly ugly. The 4 great Azure Dragon Guards were the mainstays of the Azure Dragon Branch Hall. Now that 3 of them were dead, it was a great loss. I see. This Zhuan is really audacious. He even dared to kill the people of the Blue Dragon Hall. He can't blame anyone for his death. Emperor Qing's gaze was calm, and no one could see through his true thoughts. However, Grand Haohai, who was following behind Emperor Qing, was ecstatic. He was happy to see Zhuan die. He couldn't wait for Juan to die. Now that Juan was dead, how could he not be happy? As for Grand Baiha, her beautiful eyes flickered with a trace of complexity. Especially when she heard Qin Yen say that Juan had killed 3 of the 4 great Azure Dragon Guards, her heart couldn't help but tremble. Zhuowen's strength was stronger than during the conferred marquee battle. He could even kill an initial stage sovereign expert. It was a pity that he was dead now. Grand Baiha also couldn't wait for Zhuan to die. However, when she found out that Zhuan had really died in front of her, she couldn't feel happy. In the past, Zhuan was unknown, so she naturally didn't pay attention to him. However, since Zhuowen's strong rise, Grand Baiha's mentality suddenly changed. The man in her fantasy should be a peerless genius who defeated countless geniuses in the world and climbed to the top, showing disdain for the heroes. Zhuowen's performance along the way was undoubtedly more and more in line with her inner expectations. It was even to the extent that when Zhuowen fought with Huangfu Wudao and caused Huangfu Wudao to be in an extremely sorry state, Grant Lily even had a trace of regret. If the Grand family didn't break the engagement, perhaps a peerless genius like Zhuan would have become the son-in-law of the Grand family and become the husband of Grand Baiha. And Zhuan would undoubtedly be able to lead the Grand family to a new peak. "What's wrong with me?" Grand Baiha muttered to herself in a low voice. Qin Yen stole a glance at Emperor Qing and asked, "May I know why Emperor Qing has come to the intoxicated spring pavilion?" "It's said that Zhuan has a dragon soul in his body. Your Blue Dragon Hall should have a dragon soul detector, right? I wonder if this rumor is true?" Emperor Qing suddenly asked. Hearing this, Qin Yen hesitated for a moment before bowing and saying, "This boy does have a dragon soul." "Then what's the quality of the dragon soul?" Emperor Qing continued to ask. "The dragon soul in this boy's body is very powerful. It caused the dragon soul detector to explode." Qin Yen didn't hide anything. Emperor Qing's eyes flickered as he muttered to himself, "A dragon soul above the 7th grade?" As he spoke, Emperor Qing shook his sleeve and the green light that wrapped around Zhuan flew to Emperor Qing's side. Soon after, Emperor Qing broke through the sky and left. "I'm taking Zhuan away. You just have to talk to Aoki." Chapter 793. Griefbang. Qin Yen waved his right hand and a ray of green light shot out from his hand like a snake and disappeared into the horizon. "I've already used a 1,000-mile sound transmission to inform the palace master of the situation here. Let's return to the Blue Dragon Hall now." As he spoke, Qin Yen brought Qing Yi and Su Lingtian out of the drunken spring pavilion. The corpses of Qing Er, Qing San and Qing Si were naturally taken away under Qin Yan's orders. As Qin Yen left, the originally quiet space in the drunken spring pavilion became noisy once again. Those who were scared away by Su Lingtian returned to the open space. Everyone's eyes flickered as they looked at the messy space. Of course, the topic of their discussion was naturally Zhuowen's life and death. Most of the people present knew that Zhuowen's heart had been dug out by Su Lingtian. It was unlikely that he would survive. What a pity! Zhuan was the dark horse of this ranking tournament. His strength and talent were extremely terrifying. Even the first prince, Huangfu Wudao, couldn't do anything to him. It's really a pity that such a genius died just like that. Although they didn't see Zhuowen's corpse in the open space, they all knew that Zhuowen definitely wouldn't survive. Moreover, this news would probably spread like wildfire in the imperial city tomorrow. Thousands of miles away from the drunken spring pavilion, 2 terrifying figures clashed as terrifying auras erupted. The surrounding space collapsed and shattered as the 2 exchanged blows. Bang! A circular wave of air spread out as the 2 figures each retreated several hundred feet. They stabilized their bodies and stared at each other from afar. "Don't force me. If anything happens to Zhuan, I'll kill you," Lu Hantian said with a cold gaze. Taoki sneered and said, "Lu Hantian, you and I are both at the peak of the heavenly sovereign stage. Do you really think that you can kill me?" Lu Hantian's gaze darkened as he became even more anxious. He didn't know why, but he had a bad premonition since just now. He really wanted to rush back now. Unfortunately, Aoki was obstructing him at every turn. All of a sudden, a green light shot over from afar and landed in Aoki's hand. Sound transmission from 1,000 miles away. Looks like Qing Yan and the others have succeeded. Aoki's eyes revealed a trace of joy. He sent his consciousness into the green light in his hand. Immediately, a stream of information was transmitted into his mind. After a while, Aoki slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was gloomy. Lu Hantian, let's stop here today. I won't bother you anymore. Aoki's expression was unsightly as he said this. With a stomp of his foot, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared in front of Lu Hantian. Lu Hantian narrowed his eyes. With Lu Hantian's observation skills, he could naturally see the displeasure and anger in Qing Mu's eyes. It was obvious that the content of the sound transmission just now was not good news. Let's go back to the drunken spring pavilion first. With a stomp of his foot, Lu Hantian also disappeared. He had been worried about Zhuowen's safety. After returning to the drunken spring pavilion, Lu Hantian quickly noticed the mess in the open space of the drunken spring pavilion. The uneasiness in his heart became even more intense. I wonder how Nantian and Zhuowen are doing? After saying this, Lu Hantian rushed towards the rooms in the Shuiyu area. After a while, Lu Hantian reappeared. His expression was extremely gloomy. Whether it was Zhuowen's room or the rooms of Lu Nantian and the other geniuses of Muqing County, all of them were gone. This scene made Lu Hantian's heart turn cold. Young Master Lu, are you looking for the geniuses of Muqing County? A clear and melodious voice rang out. Lu Hantian looked over and saw an enchanting woman slowly walking out from one of the rooms. Do you know where they went? Lu Hantian asked with a frown. Mother Su looked around vigilantly and then said softly, "Come with me. Right now, the people of Blue Dragon Hall are looking for your Muqing County. It's best not to be too conspicuous." Lu Hantian's eyes narrowed. It seemed that in order to capture Zhuowen, the Blue Dragon Hall wouldn't even let the geniuses of Muqing County go. How hateful. After saying this, Mother Su carefully led Lu Hantian towards an inconspicuous back door of the drunken spring pavilion. 100 meters away from the back door was an abandoned and dilapidated house. This was a slum area where the homeless beggars gathered. On the dilapidated path, there was even a pungent stench that permeated the air. Lu Hantian and Mother Su walked on the path. From time to time, they would attract the attention of the beggars on the path. After all, their clothes and temperament didn't fit in with this slum area. After turning into an alley, at the end of the alley, there was a low house. Inside the house, there was still a dim oil lamp. The door of the house was suddenly opened. A young man with a dispirited expression walked out. His eyelids were drooping, and there was an unconcealable sadness in his eyes. "Itao!" Lu Hantian suddenly called out. The young man's body trembled. He immediately saw Lu Hantian and Mother Su at the door. He was startled at first, then his gaze became extremely cold. He said coldly, "Why are you here? Where did you go just now?" Lu Hantian was somewhat confused by Lu Itao's attitude. He asked, "What's wrong?" Mother Su, who was standing beside Lu Hantian, hesitated for a moment. She gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "Lu Nanan is dead." Hearing this, Lu Hantian was thunderstruck. He was stunned on the spot. He said in disbelief, "What did you say? Nantan is dead? Ha! Are you putting on an act in front of me? When my father was besieged by the Azure Dragon Guards, where were you? Why didn't you show up? If you were at the drunken spring pavilion, then my father wouldn't have died." Lu Itao shouted somewhat hysterically. With this shout, the other geniuses of Muqing County in the house followed the sound and walked out. Naturally, they also saw Lu Hantian standing in front of the door. Many of them revealed joyful expressions. With Lu Hantian here, they didn't have to hide in the Blue Dragon Hall. "Brother Lu, don't be impulsive. If Marshal Uncle Lu was at the drunken spring pavilion, he would definitely have come out. Since he didn't come out, he must have been delayed by something," Luo Xing and Qing Lian hurriedly advised. Lu Hantian said in a low voice, "Itao, I'm sorry. At that time, I was delayed by the hall master of the Blue Dragon Hall, Aoki, so I didn't have time. I'm really sorry." At this point, Lu Hantian's lips and voice trembled. After all, Lu Nantian was his younger brother. How could he not be sad when he died like this? The Hall Master of the Blue Dragon Hall? When everyone heard this, they were dumbfounded. No wonder Lu Hantian didn't appear for so long. It turned out that he was delayed by Aoki. It seemed that the people of the Blue Dragon Hall had made many preparations. Lu Hantian also calmed down at this moment. He also knew that he was too agitated just now. He took out a porcelain bottle from his spirit ring and handed it to Lu Hantian. Father's body has been cremated by me. After all, the nascent soul of the Xuanzuan realm is too weak. Father's nascent soul dissipated not long after. After receiving the porcelain bottle, the sadness in Lu Hantian's eyes became even more intense. Although the 4 Venerable Realm experts had nascent souls, they had to be at least in the Golden Venerable Realm to be able to leave the body and survive. The nascent soul of the Xuanzuan realm was too weak and couldn't exist for too long. Lu Hantian knew this better than anyone else. His gaze became even colder. Lu Hantian said coldly, "Who killed Nantian?" Qing Si of the Azure Dragon Guard. However, because of Jun, he was killed by me. At this point, Lu Yitao's gaze suddenly became extremely cold. He said, "However, the order to kill father was given by Qing Yan. Therefore, other than Qing Si, the mastermind was Qing Yan." "Qing Yan? I will properly settle this score with this guy," Lu Hantian said with murderous intent. Lu Hantian suddenly looked around and asked doubtfully, "Where's Jun?" As soon as he said this, everyone suddenly became much quieter. In fact, it was so quiet that it was terrifying. "What's wrong?" Lu Hantian had a bad feeling in his heart. "He is dead," Sun Yang suddenly said softly. Lu Hantian was stunned. His body even trembled slightly. He placed his hands on Sun Yang's shoulders and said in a low voice, "How is that possible? You're saying that Zhuowen is dead." Sun Yang frowned slightly and sighed softly. "Although I wasn't there at the time, those who were there saw with their own eyes that Zhuowen's heart was dug out by a mysterious person. I'm afraid that it's not very likely that he's still alive." Lu Yitao and the other geniuses of Muqing County all revealed sorrowful expressions. Sun Yang had already told them about Zhuowen's death. They also didn't expect that Zhuowen, who had always been so strong, would actually die. They didn't even know the identity of Zhuowen's killer. Who killed Zhuowen? Was it someone from the Blue Dragon Hall? Lu Hantian asked through gritted teeth. Sun Yang shook her head and said, "That person wasn't from the Blue Dragon Hall. As for who it was, I don't know either. I only know that the person who killed Jun was an ugly, one-armed man who was rather old." Hearing this, Lu Hantian frowned slightly. His eyes were filled with coldness. How could he not know that ugly, one-armed man? He was one of the people who came with the Azure Dragon Guard. Was Zhuowen's body taken away by the Blue Dragon Hall? Lu Hantian asked again. Sun Yang shook her head and said, "No, Emperor Qing came later and took Zhuowen away. As for what Emperor Qing wants, I'm not too sure." "Emperor Qing? It seems that I have to make a trip to the Imperial City." Lu Hantian whispered with a flicker in his eyes. Lu Yitao and the others came to Lu Hantian's side. Lu Yitao said, "Uncle, the Imperial City is filled with danger. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for you to go tonight." Lu Hantian shook his head and said, "It's fine. Emperor Qing will give me face. As for you guys, you should leave the Imperial City as soon as possible and return to Muqing County. The Imperial City is currently in a turbulent situation. This is a place of trouble. Staying here won't do you any good." After saying this, Lu Hantian didn't stay any longer. With a leap, he disappeared into the horizon. Watching Lu Hantian leave, a commotion broke out among Lu Yitao and the others. Most of the Muqing County geniuses standing behind Lu Yitao looked at Lu Yitao. At this moment, Lu Yitao had undoubtedly become their backbone. "Let's leave the Imperial City tomorrow. Uncle is right. The Imperial City is a place of trouble. There's no need for us juniors to stay here." Lu Yitao sighed and looked at Sun Yang and said, "Sun Yang, I know that your drunken spring pavilion has a secret way out of the Imperial City. I hope that you can help us leave the Imperial City this time." Why should my drunken spring pavilion help your Muqing County? Sun Yang said with a smile. Because Lu Hantian is my uncle. Lu Yitao said meaningfully. Hearing this, Sun Yang's beautiful eyes flickered. She sighed and said, "It seems that your eyes are even sharper than Lu Nannan. Then I'll help you one more time. Tomorrow morning, I'll arrange for you to leave the Imperial City." Chapter 794. Extracting the dragon's soul. Late at night, the Imperial City was heavily guarded. Teams of armored soldiers guarded the various checkpoints and important points of the Imperial City. A figure slowly descended at the gate. Immediately, the soldiers on both sides of the gate stopped him and shouted, "Who are you? The Imperial City is not open to outsiders at night." "I am Lu Hantian from Muqing County. I have something important to discuss with the Azure Emperor. I hope you can report it to him," Lu Hantian said calmly. "Lu Hantian? I have never heard of you. You are not a member of the Imperial family. Leave now." The soldier at the gate said coldly. Lu Hantian narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to flare up, the sound of horse hooves came from behind him. Then a clear voice sounded. "Let him in." Lu Hantian turned around and saw a handsome man riding a tall horse. He rode over quickly and stopped beside Lu Hantian. "Lord Li Jin. Since Lord Li has said so, you can go in," the soldier at the gate said respectfully as he bowed. "Brother Lu, follow me in. The Qing Emperor already knew that you would come," Li Jin said with a smile. Lu Hantian nodded and said, "Thank you, Brother Li." Lu Hantian did not hesitate and followed Li Jin into the depths of the Imperial City. The two of them quickly arrived at the plaza. At the end of the plaza was the Azure Emperor's throne room. At this moment, the throne room was pitch black. It was as silent as a giant dragon. "Brother Lu, I can only send you here. The Azure Emperor is in the throne room. You just need to enter the throne room." After Li Jin finished speaking, he pulled on the reins and turned the horse around to leave the square. Lu Hantian's eyes flashed. The Azure Emperor's arrangement meant that he already knew that Lu Hantian would come to the Imperial City to look for him. Therefore, Lu Hantian did not hesitate and walked directly to the throne room. There was not a single speck of light in the square or the throne room. Everything was plunged into darkness, and a deathly silence pervaded the surroundings. Stepping into the hall, Lu Hantian discovered that it was even darker than the outside. It was so dark that he couldn't tell which direction he was going. Fortunately, his cultivation base was high. In this kind of pitch-black environment, he could rely on his senses to walk deeper into the hall. As he went deeper, the originally pitch-black environment gradually brightened. Finally, Yun arrived at the center of the hall, where it was as bright as day. At the same time, a tall and straight figure stood there quietly with his back facing Lu Hantian like a statue. "Your Majesty Qing Di, I heard that Zhuan was taken away by you. May I know where Zhuan is now?" Lu Hantian's gaze focused on the figure in front of him, and he suddenly asked. Slowly turning around, the Qing Emperor calmly stared at Lu Hantian. With a wave of his sleeve, a green light shot out and appeared in front of him. Within this green light was a person. Upon closer inspection, it was Zhuan, who had been taken away by the Qing Emperor. Lu Hantian was shocked. He took a step forward and his gaze landed on Zhuan's body within the green light. Especially when he saw the terrifying wound on Zhuan's back, his expression turned extremely ugly. Just as Mother Su had said, Zhuan's back had indeed been cruelly dug out. With such a terrifying injury, Yun was definitely dead. However, Lu Hantian was shocked to discover that Zhuan was still breathing. He hurriedly said, "Your Majesty Qing Di, Zhuan is not dead yet. Can you save him? His heart is damaged. The chances of saving him are too low. This emperor is relying on my own strength to forcefully prolong Zhuan's life. Even so, Zhuan won't last 3 days." The Qing Emperor shook his head and said indifferently, "Is there no other way?" Lu Hantian asked with a frown as he clenched his fists. The Qing Emperor's eyes flickered. Suddenly he said, "There might be a way." Lu Hantian's eyes revealed a look of ecstasy. He hurriedly asked, "Your Majesty Qing Emperor, what other way is there?" "Follow me." The Qing Emperor waved his sleeves and led Zhuan, who was within the green light, to the deepest part of the hall. Although Lu Hantian was filled with doubts, he still followed closely behind the Qing Emperor. The two of them soon arrived at the room where the Azure Supreme the Arch had bestowed enlightenment on the 10 geniuses. This room was very spacious, and there was an open-air space in the middle of the room. There was a huge dragon-shaped illusory image circling above, looking very majestic. Below the dragon-shaped image was an altar that was half the height of a person. When they arrived before the altar, the Qing Emperor suddenly said, "There is a dragon vein below the altar. There is a dense dragon vein aura inside. Yuan has a dragon soul in his body. If we can open this dragon vein and guide the dragon vein aura into Zhuowen's body, perhaps Zhuowen will be able to recover. Right now, I have to prolong Zhuowen's life at all times. It is not possible to open this dragon vein. Hence, I need you to help me open the altar this time. After that, I will guide the dragon vein aura inside." At this point, the Qing Emperor looked at Lu Hantian and said, "This is the only chance to save Zhuowen." Lu Hantian's eyes flickered. He knew that there was a dragon vein in the imperial city, but he did not expect that the one controlling it was actually this unremarkable altar before him. However, what surprised Lu Hantian was that the Qing Emperor had actually revealed such an important place to him. Was the Qing Emperor not afraid that he, Lu Hantian, would leak it? "If you are unwilling, I will not force you." The Qing Emperor's eyes were calm, and there was not the slightest change in them. Lu Hantian gritted his teeth and said, "If I can save Zhuowen, what's wrong with opening the altar?" As he spoke, Lu Hantian stepped forward and arrived at the altar in an instant. He looked at the Qing Emperor and asked, "What do I need to do?" "It's very simple. You just need to place your hand on the floating crystal on the altar and channel the origin energy in your body into it. However, this will require an extremely large amount of origin energy to support it. When the time comes, you must be mentally prepared." The Qing Emperor said calmly, "No problem. Since that is the case, let's begin." Lu Hantian did not hesitate any longer. He activated the origin energy in his body and channeled it into the crystal in his hand. Instantly, the crystal in his hand emitted a terrifying and dazzling light. The light was extremely dazzling. Finally, it turned into a pillar of light that shot up into the sky and surged into the dragon-shaped shadow in the sky. The dragon-shaped shadow roared and swooped down. Its dragon claws, which were as large as hills, crushed downward. Instantly, a huge black hole appeared in the center of the hall not far from the altar. This black hole was bottomless. It was like an abyss. A resounding dragon roar resounded, following which, waves of dazzling dragon vein energy gushed out from the black hole. Looking at the dragon vein energy that was gushing out continuously, the Qing Emperor's eyes revealed a trace of joy. His right hand formed a claw, and the dragon vein energy that was gushing out immediately followed his guidance and circled around him. "Your Majesty Qing Di, you can start saving Zhuowen now." On the altar, Lu Hantian was panting and his face was pale. The altar had absorbed a large amount of origin energy from his body, causing him to be extremely weak. Of course, the Qing Emperor revealed a sinister smile. His right hand formed a sword and pointed at Zhuowen's forehead. Under the guidance of the Qing Emperor, strands of dragon vein energy gushed into Zhuowen's forehead. Seeing that the Qing Emperor had indeed made a move to save Shaoqin, Lu Hantian heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to leave the altar, he realized that a four-sided barrier had appeared around the altar unknowingly, preventing him from leaving. Lu Hantian slammed his right hand on the barrier. There was a muffled sound as he took a few steps back. He looked at the barrier in front of him gloomily. His attack actually did not cause any damage to the barrier at all. "Your Majesty, what is the meaning of this?" Lu Hantian's eyes were gloomy as he stared at the Qing Emperor in front of him. His voice was cold. "Nothing. This is just to prevent you from interfering with my work." The Qing Emperor pressed his right hand on Zhuowen's forehead. Strands of dragon vein energy entered Zhuowen's forehead, causing the veins on Zhuowen's forehead to bulge. His face revealed a pained expression. "What did you do to Zhuowen?" Lu Hantian's expression changed when he saw the expression on Zhuowen's face. "Ha, Lu Hantian, are you really so naive to think that the dragon vein energy can save Zhuowen's life? Let me tell you the truth. The dragon vein energy can extract the dragon soul in Zhuowen's body. If I can obtain Zhuowen's dragon soul, I will have a chance of improving my cultivation. The Qing Emperor suddenly laughed out loud. His originally calm eyes were now filled with fervor. Qin Yan had said that the dragon soul in Zhuowen's body was at least grade 7. If he could obtain such a high-grade dragon soul, it would be extremely beneficial to the Qing Emperor. Bastard! Have you never thought of saving Zhuowen's life from the beginning? Lu Hantian shouted angrily. The Qing Emperor shook his head and said indifferently, I'm just making the best use of it. Zhuowen's identity as a descendant of the Ryuka family has been exposed. He will definitely be wanted by the Blue Dragon Hall in the future. Moreover, his heart has been dug out. If I hadn't used my own strength to protect his heart, he would have died long ago. Since he is going to die anyway, it's worth it to contribute the dragon soul. The Qing Emperor's smile widened. Lu Hantian was enraged. He repeatedly hammered the walls. Unfortunately, the walls in front of him were too sturdy. He couldn't break through the walls at all. He could only watch as the Qing Emperor separated the dragon soul from Zhuowen's body. The Qing Emperor no longer cared about the furious Lu Hantian. He had specially set up the 4 walls for Lu Hantian. Even if the Lu Hantian was at his peak, it would be difficult for him to break through the walls, let alone the Lu Hantian who had exhausted most of his origin energy. What a strong soul power! The dragon soul in Zhuowen's body is not simple. With the help of the dragon vein energy, the Qing Emperor easily detected the dragon's soul hidden in the depths of Zhuowen's mind. A clear dragon's roar suddenly rang out, following which, the Qing Emperor's right hand jerked violently. An extremely strange ink-black light shot out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. The dense ink-black light shot up into the sky and turned into a thick ink-black fog. Following which, the fog suddenly exploded. A huge black dragon that was thousands of feet long swept out from the fog. Its teeth were cold, and its black scales were like a forest. On the huge dragon's spine, 3 pairs of black dragon wings were spread out. It rode the wind and stood upright. Chapter 795. SS Xiao Hei's real body. The dragon's body was thousands of feet long as it hovered above the throne room. It looked mighty and domineering, and its black dragon scales emitted a piercing cold light. Both Lu Hantian and the Lotus the Arch were stunned when they saw the huge black dragon in the sky. They had not expected the dragon soul in Zhuowen's body to be so mighty. The black dragon's body faintly emitted a terrifying aura that even made the Lotus the Arch tremble slightly. This was not because the black dragon was stronger than the Lotus the Arch, but because this black dragon was of a higher level. It was an aura that was invisibly emitted. It's indeed an extraordinary dragon soul. The Azure Supreme the Arch was overjoyed. The Azure Supreme the Arch felt that this black dragon was extremely powerful. This was definitely an extremely high-level dragon soul. If he could make this dragon soul his own, his strength would increase tremendously. Your master is hopeless. Once he dies, you will disappear with him. Rather than disappearing, why don't you follow me? I can bring you a glorious future. The Lotus the Arch raised his head and said with a fervent look in his eyes. The huge black dragon looked down at the Lotus the Arch and said in a majestic voice, "A dragon soul is innate. Do you think it's possible to graft it onto your body?" The black dragon's words stunned the Lotus the Arch. Not only did this black dragon have intelligence, but it could also speak. The Lotus the Arch immediately realized that this black dragon was extraordinary. His desire to obtain this black dragon grew even stronger. Who said it's impossible? As long as you sign a contract with me, you can attach yourself to my consciousness and become my dragon soul. As he spoke, the Lotus the Arch waved his sleeve, and a scroll appeared in his hand. He said calmly, "This is a contract scroll. As long as you sign this contract with me, you can leave Zhuowen's body and graft yourself onto mine." The black dragon's eyes narrowed as it said calmly, "I didn't expect you to have a contract scroll. This should be an ancient item. However, do you think I'm a fool? If I sign this contract, won't I become your servant?" The corners of the Lotus Emperor's mouth curled into a smile, and he said, "Do you have a choice? This Yuan won't be able to hold on for much longer. If you don't choose me, you will disappear along with this Yuan. Are you willing to disappear just like that?" The smile on the Lotus Thearcha's face deepened. He was very confident. After all, Yuan would not last long in his current state. The Lotus the Arch knew that this black dragon would make the right decision. "It seems that you are very confident. However, I'm afraid that this Dragon Lord's choice will disappoint you." The black dragon fiercely roared and instantly swooped down. With a wave of its huge dragon claw, it grabbed Zhuowen and pulled him into its claw. Soon after, it suddenly plunged into the huge black hole in the hull. You want to leave? Not so easy. This Zhuowen is dead for sure. It's useless for you to take him away." The Lotus Emperor snorted coldly and took a step forward. A terrifying green force swept out from his body like a violent storm. Then he struck out with his palm in an attempt to stop the black dragon from entering the black hole. The black dragon's eyes were cold as it stretched out its huge dragon claw, which was surrounded by a terrifying black fog, and also struck toward the Lotus Emperor. Boom! The Lotus Emperor smashed the black dragon's claw with irresistible force. Then, the Lotus Emperor leaped up and tried to grab Zhuowen, who was on the black dragon's other claw. Otherwise, the black dragon would take Zhuowen away. The black dragon's eyes were filled with determination. With a toss of its dragon claw, Zhuowen was immediately thrown into the black hole. Then, it swung its huge dragon tail and attacked the Lotus Emperor. "It's useless. You are only a soul body, and you are so weak. You are no match for me at all. Even though I don't know why you tossed Zhuowen into the dragon vein, as far as I'm concerned, Zhuowen is already dead." The Lotus Emperor snorted coldly. His right hand turned into a claw and a terrifying green force swept out and hit the black dragon's tail heavily. An ear-piercing explosion sounded and the black dragon's tail was instantly smashed into pieces by the Lotus Emperor. However, the Lotus Emperor was also forced to retreat under the aftermath of this force. His gaze became extremely grave. The black dragon's huge body had become increasingly dim after a few exchanges with the Lotus Emperor. Taking advantage of the Lotus Emperor's retreat, it roared and immediately turned into a wisp of black fog and entered the black hole. Damn it! The Lotus Emperor came to the entrance of the black hole and looked at the pitch-black abyss below. His eyes flickered. The dragon vein was deep below. Although the Lotus Emperor's strength was terrifying, he was not qualified to enter the dragon vein. After all, the vast dragon vein energy inside was extremely repulsive to him. Furthermore, Zhuowen had the dragon soul. Not only was he not repulsed, but he was also nourished by the dragon vein energy. This was why only experts with the dragon soul could open up the dragon vein. "Your Majesty Lotus Emperor, it seems like you have worked for nothing." Lu Hantian, who was above the Four Directions barrier, mocked the Lotus Emperor gloatingly. When the Lotus Emperor had deceived him and used the dragon vein energy to strip Zhuowen of his dragon soul, Lu Hantian had already lost all goodwill towards the Lotus Emperor. Naturally, he would not have any respect for him. "Humph! Lu Hantian, you seem to be very happy that I have failed." The Lotus Emperor's gaze turned slightly and focused on Lu Hantian. His face was filled with coldness. With a wave of his sleeve, the barrier around Lu Hantian was instantly broken by the Lotus Emperor. Shortly after, the Lotus Emperor took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Lu Hantian. Looking at the Lotus Emperor, Lu Hantian's expression changed drastically. He took a step forward and instantly condensed countless blood-colored spear shadows, forming an extremely terrifying spear intent domain around him. "You are too weak." The Lotus Emperor shook his head and slowly stretched out his right hand. He gently pressed it on Lu Hantian's spear intent domain. With a cracking sound, the spear intent domain instantly shattered and turned into dust. "Puchi!" Lu Hantian coughed up a mouthful of blood as he staggered back, his body unsteady. "I will not kill you first. I will only seal your cultivation." A cold voice came from behind Lu Hantian. Following which, a hand suddenly slammed onto Lu Hantian's back. In an instant, a surge of Yuan energy invaded Lu Hantian's body, causing the Yuan energy in his body to stop flowing. His meridians seemed to be frozen, and he was unable to use his yuan energy. Lotus Emperor, why are you doing this? Feeling the sealed yuan energy in his body, Lu Hantian's expression changed slightly. Because you know too much. You know the method to open the dragon vein here and the contract scroll on me. Therefore, I will not let you leave the throne room without worry. Therefore, you should stay in the palace's dungeon for the rest of your life. The Lotus Emperor's gaze was indifferent. With a wave of his sleeve, he brought Lu Hantian out of the throne room and rushed towards the palace's dungeon in the depths of the imperial city. The Lotus Emperor did not intend to let Lu Hantian go. After all, Lu Hantian knew the method to open the dragon vein and the contract scroll on him. How could the Lotus Emperor be at ease? The Lotus Emperor had inadvertently obtained the contract scroll from an ancient ruin. This scroll was an extremely rare existence even in the ancient times. If news of it were to spread, there was no guarantee that some terrifying experts in the eastern land would come to the Qingxian Empire to snatch it. In the Blue Dragon Hall, Aoki sat on the throne with an ugly expression. He stared at Qing Yan, Qing Yi, and Su Lingtian below him. 3 of the Azure Dragon Guards are dead. Even the most important Zhuowen is dead. Qing Yan, what are you doing? Aoki berated loudly. Qing Yan lowered his head and did not explain. He knew that if he explained now, it would only make things worse. Therefore, he chose to remain silent. Seeing that Qing Yan was silent, Aoki snorted and continued, "What about Zhuowen's body?" "Palace Master, Zhuowen's body was taken away by the Lotus Emperor," Qing Yan said carefully. When Aoki heard this, he frowned slightly. He had not expected the Lotus Emperor to interfere. "Should we ask the Lotus Emperor for him?" Qing Yan glanced at Aoki secretly and asked softly. "No need. Since the Lotus Emperor wants to go, we don't have to interfere." Aoki shook his head and said plainly. Suddenly, Su Lingtian stepped forward and said in a low voice, "Palace Master, since Yun is a descendant of the Ryuka, it means that his family contains the bloodline of the Ryuka. Why don't we?" Qing Wu is right. Since Yun is a descendant of the Ryuka, it is obvious that the Zhuo family in Muqing County are all descendants of the Ryuka. If we capture the Zhuo family and hand them over to the main hall, it will be considered a great achievement. Qing Yan quickly added. Aoki nodded and said, "I heard that the Zhuo family is only a small family in Muqing County. Qing Yan, you go and make the arrangements. We don't want to capture the Zhuo family like this." Qing Yan quickly cupped his hands and said, "Rest assured, Palace Master. This time, Qing Yan will bring the Zhuo family back to the Blue Dragon Hall. You can leave now. Remember to capture him alive. He is much more valuable alive than dead." Qing Mu waved his hand and instructed in a somewhat cold manner. Qing Yan quickly acknowledged and left the main hall with Qing Yi and Su Lingtian. The next day, before the warm sun rose, Lve Tao and the other geniuses in Muqing County secretly left the imperial city under Mother Su's arrangements. At the same time, the news of Zhuowen's death spread like wildfire in the imperial city. It caused an uproar and everyone in the city knew about it. A peerless genius fell just like that. What a pity! I heard that Jun is a descendant of the Ryuka. This secret was discovered by the Blue Dragon Hall, so they sent people to encircle Jun. The power of the Blue Dragon Hall is not something that the 5 great families can compare to. They are much stronger. Under the encirclement of the Blue Dragon Hall, Jun will not be able to escape death in the end. In a restaurant, the people sitting at the table were fiercely discussing the matter of Zhuon. Most of them were wringing their hands and sighing. Not only were they sighing over the fall of a peerless genius like Zhuowen, but they were also regretting that the final battle between Zhuowen and Huangfu Wudao in 2 days would probably be aborted. Originally, many people were looking forward to another battle between Zhuowen and Huangfu Wudao. Now, it seemed that it was unlikely to happen. Chapter 796. Transplanted heart. Among the old man and young man sitting at the table drinking wine, the young man frowned and said, "Yin is actually a descendant of the Ryuka. No wonder the Blue Dragon Hall sent experts to kill him. Is Zhuowen really dead?" The young man carried a large blade on his back and his eyes shone brightly. He was Guisheng, one of the top 10 on the Green Emperor board. Opposite him was his master, Heavenly Sovereign Domineering Blade. This news should be true. It is said that the 4 great Green Dragon Guards of the Blue Dragon Hall, except for Qing Yi, have all died at the hands of Zhuan. Zhuan also perished together with them, Heavenly Sovereign Domineering Blade said. He killed 3 of the 4 great Green Dragon Guards? How terrifying! Guisheng's eyes narrowed and he couldn't help but feel shocked. He knew how powerful the Green Dragon Guards were. The weakest of them was at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm, while the strongest was at the initial stage of the Golden Venerate realm. They were considered the upper echelons of the Green Dragon Branch Hall. However, Zhuan had killed 3 of them. Zhuan was indeed terrifying. It was a pity that he had died because of this. It seems like the Heavenly Marquis position will fall into Huangfu Wudao's hands in 2 days. Guisheng shook his head and said regretfully. While everyone in the royal capital was discussing the news about Zhuan, the main character of this event, Zhuan, was slowly falling into the abyss. In the pitch-black abyss, darkness filled the entire place. Zhuan was like a feather as he slowly descended. His back was still empty and fresh blood was flowing out continuously. Although Zhuan's heart had been dug out, his physical body was too strong. In addition, the Green Emperor had been using his own power to prolong his life. At the moment Zhuan was still breathing, swoosh, a black ray of light shot over and turned into a Xiaohei dog that stood on Zhuan's body. At this moment, Xiaohei looked dispirited and its aura was weak. A hint of sorrow appeared in Xiaohei's eyes as she watched Zhuan gradually lose his vitality. She sighed softly, "Are you going to die like this, in?" Suddenly, the demon-suppressing green coffin on Zhuan's back opened, and a pair of blood-red eyes appeared in front of Zhuan. It was the blood demon. "Don't worry. This kid won't die. When his aura completely disappears, he will be reborn." The blood devil's ancient voice slowly rang out. What do you mean by that? Can't you see that Zhuan is dying? You, on the other hand, want him to die quickly and get a new life because of it?" Xiaohei stared at Blood Demon with an unfriendly gaze, and her voice became extremely cold. The Blood Demon's voice was still calm and ancient. "I have no reason to lie to you. This kid still has a heart in his right chest. It is a purplish-black heart. This heart is very strange. It has an extremely strong recovery ability. The Qing Emperor's attack just now was not to prolong Zhuan's life, but to prevent this heart from recovering Zhuan's life." The Blood Demon's words immediately caused Xiaohei's eyes to light up. The Qing Emperor's previous actions were very suspicious. If the Qing Emperor really wanted to prolong Zhuan's life, he should have thought of ways to heal Zhuan's injuries. However, the injury on Zhuan's chest did not heal at all in the Qing Emperor's hands. Instead, it worsened. It turned out that the Qing Emperor's talk about prolong his life was just an excuse. His real goal was to prevent Zhuan from recovering. As for the heart that the Blood Demon had mentioned, Xiaohei naturally knew that it was the heart of the Hades King that Zhuan had obtained from the Vitality Tower. It indeed had an extremely strong recovery ability. Transplant this purplish-black heart from his right chest to his left chest and connect the source of the torn meridians. This kid's recovery should be much faster, the Blood Demon said calmly. Xiaohei's eyes were filled with joy when she heard this. The Blood Demon's words were not without reason. Nodding her head, Xiaohei glanced at the Blood Demon and said, "You are indeed the king of the Blood Demon clan. You are quite experienced." "I am the Blood Demon, the embodiment of blood. I naturally know more about the body and bloodline than you do. However, I cannot see through your origins. I have encountered many members of the Dragon Clan in ancient times, but I have never seen a member of the Dragon Clan like you." The pair of blood-red eyes stared at Xiaohei, and his voice was filled with curiosity and interest. Knowing my identity won't do you any good. I will leave the heart transplant to you. After all, you know more than I do, Xiaohei said ambiguously. Hearing Xiaohei's words, the Blood Demon did not ask any further. After all, this was Xiaohei's secret, and he did not have the right to ask about it. The heart transplant cannot be disturbed in the slightest. Otherwise, all my efforts will be in vain. Therefore, you have to protect me, the Blood Demon said calmly. "Don't worry. Xiao He nodded in agreement. Seeing that Xiao He had agreed, the blood demon did not hesitate any longer. Waves of bloody aura surged out from the demon-suppressing green coffin and gathered into a slender bloody hand. Zhuowen and the blood demon had already made an agreement. If Zhuowen's cultivation reached the Emperor realm, the blood demon would be released and regain his freedom. Therefore, this was the reason why the blood demon was helping Zhuowen. Puji. The bloody hand penetrated deep into Zhuowen's right chest. The blood demon's control over blood was almost abnormal. Although the bloody hand had penetrated deep into Zhuowen's chest, no blood flowed out from the wound. As the bloody hand stretched out, a beating heart appeared in the bloody hand. This heart was just as the blood demon had said. It was purplish-black, and it was beating with great force. At this moment, the bloody hand's movements became very slow. It slowly removed the purplish-black heart and placed it on Zhuowen's empty left chest. This process was extremely slow. During the process of placing the heart, the blood demon was still controlling the countless meridians in Zhuowen's left chest, accurately connecting them to the purplish-black heart. This allowed the blood in Zhuowen's body to flow into the heart and form a blood circulation. This process took a whole hour. It could be said to be extremely long. In the end, the purplish-black heart in Zhuowen's left chest began to beat again. Moreover, its rate of beating gradually became faster. As the purplish-black heart's rate of beating increased, Zhuowen's originally pale face slowly became rosy. His complexion also became much better than before. This purplish-black heart is much stronger than Zhuowen's original heart. This child's recovery ability will probably become extremely terrifying. Coupled with his powerful physical body, I'm afraid that he's already an unkillable cockroach. After placing the heart, the blood demon seemed quite satisfied. His words also seemed much more relaxed and comfortable. Xiao He also saw the changes in Zhuowen. A trace of joy appeared in her eyes. She said to the blood demon, "Thank you so much for this time." This heart originally existed in Zhuowen's body. Even if I didn't transplant it, Zhuowen would have slowly recovered under the effects of this heart. However, this process would have been very long. Now that the heart has been transplanted into his heart meridian, it will only speed up his recovery ability. After saying that, the blood demon's voice gradually became softer. In the end, the demon-suppressing green coffin slowly closed. Xiao He nodded. The blood demon was right. Even if it didn't help with the heart transplant, with the recovery ability of the Hades King's heart, Zhuowen would have eventually recovered. However, Zhuowen had lost his real heart. His heart meridian was damaged, so the recovery process was extremely slow. With a purplish-black heart connected to his heart meridian, it would naturally speed up the recovery process. Next, we'll have to see when Zhuowen can recover. Xiao He muttered to herself as she silently looked at Zhuowen. Time passed by minute by minute. Very quickly, 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. Zhuowen still didn't show any signs of waking up. However, his face became more rosy, and his breathing became more stable. At the same time, there were still many people gathered in the plaza outside the throne room. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the floating platform in the plaza. At this moment, on the floating platform, Huangfu Wudao crossed his arms before his chest and stood there like a pine tree, whereas there was no one before him. Although the news of Zhuowen's death had caused an uproar in the entire imperial capital, 3 days had passed. On the day of the Heavenly Marquee battle, many people were still attracted by the news. Everyone was looking forward to Zhuowen's appearance to break the news of Zhuowen's death that had caused a huge uproar in the past few days. However, everyone was disappointed when the sun was high up in the sky. Huangfu Wudao was still standing on the floating platform, and there was still no one in front of him. Zhuowen hadn't appeared today. Everyone knew that the news of Zhuowen's death that had spread 2 days ago was most likely true. Noon has passed. Zhuowen hasn't appeared as agreed. Therefore, Huangfu Wudao is the winner of this battle. Wudao, come and accept the Heavenly Marquee token. Emperor Qing stood on the high platform with the corners of his mouth slightly raised as he spoke in a clear voice. Huangfu Wudao nodded and suddenly jumped off the floating platform. His movements were not the slightest bit sluggish. He arrived in front of Emperor Qing and received the heavenly marquee token. Thus, the ranking battle finally ended. The ranking battle has ended. The new top 10 candidates on the Azure Emperor rankings have also been chosen. Emperor Qing flicked his finger as he spoke. Instantly, a huge scroll appeared in the air. Then, the scroll slowly unfolded, revealing the information within. Without exception, the first prince, Huangfu Wudao, was ranked first. Next were the rankings of the other geniuses. They were respectively Zhuowen, Glen Baihe, Qing Yan, Zhu Bai, Guixing, Murong Zhan, Qing Ming, Huangfu Wuji, and Monk Wudeng. In the plaza, the other top 10 geniuses had basically arrived. The reason they came was naturally because they didn't believe the news of Zhuowen's death. They hoped to see if Zhuowen would come today to fight with Huangfu Wudao. But the result disappointed them. Zhuowen didn't appear at all. Perhaps Zhuowen really might have died as the rumors said. What a pity! Looks like Zhuowen really died? Guisheng frowned slightly and said somewhat unnaturally. I think that Zhuowen should be afraid. You have to know that sometimes rumors can't be trusted. Maybe that Zhuowen deliberately made up the news of his death and then used this as an excuse to not dare come. A gloomy voice resounded, and Huangfu Wudao crossed his arms before his chest as he spoke with a cold sneer. Zhuowen isn't that kind of person. Moreover, based on the situation of the battle between Zhuowen and Huangfu Wudao 3 days ago, do you think that Zhuowen needs to be afraid of a battle? Not everyone is like you, Second Prince. Chapter 797. In the depths of the dragon vein, Zhuowen slowly woke up. He felt like he had had a very long dream. In his dream, he was running tirelessly and aimlessly. When he woke up, his eyes were filled with confusion. As he looked around, Zhuowen realized that his surroundings were pitch black. However, he was quietly floating in this pitch black environment. Where is this place? Subconsciously, Zhuowen muttered. Zhuowen remembered that he was killed by Su Lingtian's sneak attack. Now, it seemed like that wasn't the case. He could still feel his heart beating vigorously. This is the dragon vein. Xiao He, who was curled up in front of Zhuowen's chest, hurriedly replied with joy when she saw that Zhuowen had woken up. Dragon vein? Could it be the dragon vein under the throne room? But how did I enter this place? Zhuowen was even more confused. Ever since he was attacked by Su Lingtian, he had fallen into a deep coma. He knew nothing about what had happened in the outside world. Xiao He sighed softly and told Zhuowen everything that had happened. The more Zhuowen heard, the more shocked he became. Especially when the Qing Emperor used the dragon vein energy to strip the dragon soul from his body and take it for himself. This caused Zhuowen's face to turn extremely gloomy. What happened to big brother Lu Hantian? Zhuowen asked coldly. Xiao He shook her head and said, I'm not too sure about that. However, I'm afraid that it doesn't bode well for him. Zhuowen frowned when he heard that. He felt a little uneasy. Lu Hantian was indeed powerful. However, no matter how powerful he was, he couldn't be a match for the Qing Emperor. Therefore, Zhuowen was very worried about Lu Hantian's safety. What made Zhuowen even more resentful was that the Azure Supreme the Arch, as the ruler of the Qing Xian Empire, not only did he not think of ways to save him, Zhuowen, but he even wanted to strip the dragon soul from Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen was already extremely weak and on the verge of death. If the dragon soul was stripped away, he would definitely die. Emperor Qing did not care about Zhuowen's life at all for the sake of the dragon soul. However, how did the Blue Dragon Hall and Emperor Qing know that I have a dragon soul and that I'm a descendant of the Ryuka bloodline? Zhuowen asked with a frown. I'm afraid that it has something to do with Grand Haohai. When Emperor Qing came, Grand Haohai and Grand Haohai were behind him. Furthermore, your father Zhuo Xiaotian has a good relationship with Grand Haohai. I'm afraid that Grand Haohai knows that your father is a descendant of the Ryuka bloodline. Xiao He's eyes flashed as she analyzed the situation in an orderly manner. The Blue Dragon Hall and Emperor Qing did not target Zhuowen previously. However, they suddenly came to the Drunken Spring Pavilion 3 days ago. Everything was too sudden. Zhuowen did not believe that no one had tipped them off. Zhuowen's eyes darkened when he heard that. Xiao He's words were not without reason. The Grand Haohai clan had a good relationship with the Zhuo family. They might really know such secrets. In addition to the Blue Dragon Hall and Emperor Qing's sudden actions, it was obvious that Grand Haohai was related to this matter. This Grand Haohai is trying to kill me by every means possible. It's really detestable. The Grand Haohai clan, the Blue Dragon Hall, and Emperor Qing. I, Tun, will not let this matter rest, Tun said coldly. At this point, Juan suddenly glanced at Xiao He and asked, Xiao He, do you have any way for me to escape from the dragon vein? There's no need to be so anxious. This dragon vein is an opportunity for you. You're so weak now. You'll only be asking for trouble if you go out. It's better for you to break through to the Xuanzuan realm in this dragon vein, Xiao He said unhurriedly. Zhuowen's eyes lit up when he heard that. Xiao He was right. The reason why Grand Haohai and the Blue Dragon Hall wanted to kill him was mainly because he, Zhuowen, did not have a strong force or strength. If he had enough strength, would the Grand Haohai clan and the Blue Dragon Hall dare to provoke him? Strength. Yuan clenched his fists. He had an unconcealable desire for strength at this moment. Now that you're awake, let's accelerate our descent. This dragon vein is extremely deep. I wonder how deep it is. Xiao He nodded. Zhuan did not waste any time. Ever since he transplanted the purple-black heart, he felt that his body was filled with endless energy. It was as if he had an inexhaustible strength. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant, the speed of Zhuowen's descent reached an extremely terrifying level. In the darkness, he was like an illusory shadow. After half a day, Zhuowen finally reached the bottom of the abyss. When Zhuowen's feet touched the ground, the smile on his face became even wider. Looking around, he realized that he was in an extremely wide natural cave. On the walls of the cave, there were uneven moonstones. The cold brilliance shone brightly in the dark cave. Around the cave, there were 5 entrances. The depths of the entrances were extremely dark as if there was no end. Which of the 5 entrances was the correct one? Zhuan frowned slightly as he stared at the 5 entrances in front of him and fell into deep thought. This cave should be part of the dragon vein. The dragon vein energy here is much thicker than above. Xiao He floated quietly in front of Zhuan. She took a deep breath and looked intoxicated. To a dragon soul like Xiao He, the dragon vein energy was definitely nourishing. However, Zhuan also realized that the dragon vein energy in the cave seemed to be repelling him and wanted to push him out. Fortunately, Xiao He was in front of him and the dragon vein energy was as obedient as a baby. It seemed that too much dragon vein energy was not beneficial to martial artists. Instead, it would repel martial artists and even harm them. No wonder Xiao He had said that only martial artists with dragon souls could enter the dragon vein. Otherwise, even an Emperor Realm martial artist like Emperor Qing would not be able to enter the dragon vein so easily. Don't worry. With me around, the dragon vein energy will not harm you. On the contrary, you can make use of a small portion of the dragon vein energy to refine it and turn it into your own yuan power. Xiao He saw the strange look on Zhuowen's face and chuckled. She waved her claws and sent a portion of the dragon vein energy into Zhuowen's glabella. A large amount of dragon vein energy was harmful to martial artists. However, a small amount of dragon vein energy was extremely beneficial to martial artists. Back then, when Emperor Qing bestowed enlightenment to the top 10 geniuses on the Azure Emperor leaderboard, he had used the Azure Dragon energy formed by the dragon vein energy to channel it into the top 10 geniuses' bodies so that they could refine it and increase their cultivation. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with joy as he felt the benefits of the dragon vein energy. It's still too early to be happy. I have already said that this dragon vein is definitely not simple. Let's explore it first. Xiao He said lazily. Zhuan nodded when he heard that. Then, he looked at the leftmost entrance of the 5 and smiled bitterly. There was not much difference between the 5 entrances. It was impossible for Zhuan to know which entrance was the real one. Hence, he could only use the stupidest method to test them one by one. Swoosh. In an instant, Zhuan took a step forward and disappeared into the depths of the leftmost entrance. After a while, Zhuan came out of the hole again and was covered in dust. It was indeed wrong. There are actually traps inside. After walking out, Zhuowen's gaze was somewhat gloomy as he muttered to himself. The leftmost entrance was a dead end. What made Zhuowen feel even more helpless was that there was actually a rather troublesome mechanism and trap inside. If it wasn't for his strong physical body and Xiao Hei's warning, Zhuowen wouldn't just be in a sorry state right now. It was very likely that he would be severely injured. Try the next entrance. This time, you must be careful. Xiao Hei cautioned him seriously. Zhuowen nodded and looked at the second entrance from the left. At this moment, his movements were much more cautious and his speed was much slower than before. After a while, Zhuowen came out of the entrance again with a gloomy expression. The second entrance was also incorrect. Following that, Zhuowen tried to enter the third and fourth entrances. As Zhuowen was much more cautious, although there were indeed traps inside, Zhuowen was much more relaxed than the first time. After retreating from the fourth entrance, Zhuowen's gaze finally landed on the fifth entrance. This was the last entrance. Since the first four entrances were dead ends, then the fifth entrance was probably the correct one. Let's go in. This entrance should lead to the core of the dragon vein. Xiao Hei stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and said excitedly. Nodding, Zhuowen took a step forward and turned into an afterimage, instantly entering the fifth entrance. Inside the entrance was a rather dark corridor, surrounded by low oval-shaped walls. The moment one entered, it gave off a dilapidated and low feeling. Zhuowen's speed was neither fast nor slow. At the same time, he was constantly on guard against his surroundings. After experiencing the traps at the first four entrances, Zhuowen naturally had to be cautious of the fifth entrance. However, what surprised Zhuowen was that after walking for an hour, there were no traps in the corridor that had been triggered. Looks like the real entrance doesn't have any traps. Kid, you can speed up now. I can feel that this corridor is very deep. With your current speed, I don't know how long it will take for you to completely walk out of this corridor. Xiao Hei's eyes flickered as she whispered into his ear. Zhuowen did not object. His hands changed the seal, and suddenly, 3 pairs of lightning wings grew out of his back. His speed was many times faster than before. Like a bolt of lightning, he flew straight into the depths of the corridor. Just as Xiao Hei had guessed, the fifth entrance was the correct entrance. There were indeed no traps inside. Zhuowen flew all the way as fast as lightning. After another hour, Zhuowen discovered that there were strands of dazzling white light in front of him. His eyes immediately revealed a look of joy. The exit is right in front. Chapter 798. 81 Dragon Aura. In front of Zhuowen was a huge natural cave. This cave was many times bigger than the one that Zhuowen had entered. What shocked Zhuowen even more was not the scene in front of him. That was because the bottom of the huge cave was filled with magma. At a glance, it looked like a huge and terrifying sea of magma. Above the sea of magma, there were terrifying magma dragons that were tens of thousands of feet long. They were rolling around continuously, as if there were tens of thousands of dragons fighting for supremacy. It was so exciting that Zhuowen could not help but be stunned on the spot. In the sky above the sea of magma, there were so many magma dragons. Some were lying down, some were soaring, some were looking up at the sky, some were looking down, and all of them were displaying different postures. This scene was simply too shocking. Is this the core of the dragon vein? Zhuowen muttered to himself as he opened his mouth in an exaggerated manner. Indeed, this is the core of the dragon vein. The magma dragons in front of you are not real dragons, but the dragon aura left behind by real dragons. Xiao Hei quietly floated beside Zhuowen. She looked at the huge dragons in front of her with shock in her eyes. 81 Dragon Aura? In the sky above the sea of magma, there were a total of 81 magma dragons that were entangled with each other. They looked majestic and terrifying. Dragon Aura? What is that? Zhuowen did not know much about the dragon aura that Xiao Hei had mentioned. He could not understand it at all. Dragon's might is actually the power that belongs to a true dragon. Generally speaking, power is formless, but dragon's might is tangible. Once a true dragon appears, it will release endless dragon's might, as if it is summoning 10,000 dragons to fight for it. Xiao Hei's gaze was fixed on the 81 dragon aura above the sea of magma. She was deep in thought as she continued, Actually, when I entered the throne room previously, I could faintly feel the aura of a real dragon in this dragon vein. Now, in this dragon vein, there is actually dragon might. Clearly, this dragon might was left behind by a true dragon. In other words, this dragon vein is actually the place where a true dragon fell. Hearing this, Zhuowen's pupils constricted. This inconspicuous dragon vein was actually the place where a true dragon had fallen. Didn't that mean that the corpse of an ancient and powerful true dragon was in this dragon vein? Xiaohei, do you know where the true dragon's corpse is in the dragon vein? Zhuowen asked Xiaohei. Xiaohei was a dragon herself, and her origins were mysterious. She knew much more about true dragons than he did. Since the 81 dragon aura is above the sea of magma, it means that the true dragon's corpse is below the sea of magma. Xiaohei pointed at the sea of magma. Zhuowen's eyelids twitched as he stared at the sea of magma in front of him. His expression was a little ugly. The sea of magma was bottomless, and the temperature of the magma was extremely high. It had somewhat exceeded Zhuowen's expectations. Although Zhuowen was confident that he could dive into the sea of magma, the key was that he could not last for too long. After all, this magma was the earth core fire, and its power was comparable to earth fire. Moreover, it was such a huge sea of magma. Its power could not be underestimated. Xiaohei, this sea of magma doesn't look shallow. Will it really be okay for me to dive in? Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he asked. Of course there will be a problem. This sea of magma is extremely deep, and the true dragon's corpse is probably at the bottom of the sea of magma. With your current strength, it is not possible for you to dive to the bottom. Xiaohei answered without hesitation. Zhuowen was speechless as he replied, Then what should I do? The dragon vein energy here is extremely rich. Cultivate here for a period of time, and I will assist you. Once you break through to the Xuanzuan realm, you will have a great chance of entering the bottom of the sea of magma. Xiaohei stared at Zhuowen and said indifferently, It seems that this is the only way. Now that I am half a step into the Xuanzuan realm, I am only half a step away from the Xuanzuan realm. By relying on the dragon vein energy here, I have a great chance of successfully breaking through to the Xuanzuan realm. Zhuowen nodded. He agreed with Xiaohei's suggestion. Now, Zhuowen's combat strength was extremely terrifying. He was only half a step into the Xuanzuan realm, but he could fight against an early-stage supreme being alone. If he successfully broke through to the Xuanzuan realm, Xiaohei might be able to materialize. At that time, his strength would undergo an earth-shaking change. Even a golden supreme being might not be able to defeat him. I will help you refine the dragon vein here. This way, your cultivation speed will be much faster. After Xiaohei finished speaking, it waved its right claw. Immediately, the rich dragon vein energy above the sea of magma flowed into Zhuowen's body through its little claw. In the sky above the sea of magma, the 81 dragons seemed to have discovered Zhuowen, who had arrived at the edge of the sea of magma. However, they did not do anything. It was obvious that they were under some kind of restriction and could not approach the edge of the cliff where Zhuowen was. Zhuowen sat cross-legged and silently absorbed the dragon vein energy that Xiaohei guided to him. He integrated it into his meridians and continuously increased his yuan power. The yuan power was like a river that flowed into the sea. It flowed along his meridians and finally entered Zhuowen's dantian. It made Zhuowen's dantian even rounder and fuller. Zhuowen's aura also became more vigorous. Xiaohei nodded continuously as it watched Zhuowen silently refine the dragon vein energy. It did not doubt Zhuowen's talent and qualifications. Moreover, it had been some time since Zhuowen entered the Xuanzuan realm. If he had cultivated according to his original foundation, he would have been able to break through to the Xuanzuan realm within half a year. With the failure of his first attempt to break through to the Xuanzuan realm, Zhuowen's second attempt to break through to the Xuanzuan realm would definitely be successful. Now, with the surging energy of the dragon vein energy, the time to break through to the Xuanzuan realm would undoubtedly be much earlier. Time passed by minute. 10 days passed by slowly. In these 10 days, Zhuowen continuously absorbed the surging energy provided by the dragon vein energy. His aura also continued to grow. When the 10th day had passed, The aura in Zhuowen's body had almost reached its peak. It was like a reservoir that was filled to the brim. Looks like he is preparing to break through? Xiao Hei's eyes were extremely sharp. It could tell at a glance that Zhuowen's current state was a sign that he was about to break through. Boom! A thunderous sound exploded in the air. Then, a terrifying aura spread throughout the entire cave like a tsunami. Suddenly, the air around the cave seemed to have frozen. A terrifying gravitational force gathered around the cave. Xiao Hei's eyes lit up when it sensed the powerful aura that appeared out of nowhere in the cave. It knew that Zhuon was about to break through. At that moment, Zhuowen's eyes suddenly opened. A sharp light flickered in his eyes, as bright as the stars in the night sky. Then, Zhuon slowly stood up and looked up at the sky. An even more terrifying aura surged out and gathered above Zhuon. Finally, it formed a huge light pillar that shot up into the sky. The moment the light pillar shot up into the sky, the space above the cave distorted and a crack appeared. The light pillar shot up into the sky through the crack and swept toward the ground. The originally calm space above the throne room was now occupied by a huge light pillar. It was earth-shattering and looked extremely terrifying. Someone has broken through to the Xuanzuan realm? That's the direction of the Imperial City. In the Imperial City, everyone looked up at the sky and looked at the light pillar that pierced the sky. Their eyes were filled with envy. They wondered who in the imperial family was that had successfully broken through to the Xuanzuan realm and become a mystique supremacy. While everyone in the imperial city was guessing, many people in the imperial city were also looking up at the sky. There were even many important figures of the imperial family who were looking at the light pillar, their eyes filled with doubt. Among them, Huangfu Wuji was the most puzzled. He muttered in a low voice, "I know all the geniuses of the imperial family. There are only a few that have been in seclusion recently, but they are all quite far away from the Xuanzuan realm. So, who is the one that broke through? I have to go and take a look." As he spoke, Huangfu Wuji leapt up and rushed in the direction of the light pillar. Soon, Huangfu Wuji arrived in the skies above the throne room. What surprised him was that the pillar of light that soared into the skies did not originate from the throne room, but rather from a crack in the skies above the throne room, from which it swept out. What the hell is going on? What a strange light pillar! Huangfu Wuji said, a little bewildered. At the same time, many people from the imperial family also rushed over, including the first prince, Huangfu Wudao. Huangfu Wudao came to Huangfu Wuji's side and stared at the light pillar that rushed out from the crack. His brows furrowed. Even he found this phenomenon somewhat inconceivable. "Second brother, do you know what's going on?" Huangfu Wudao's eyes flashed as he asked. "I don't know. This light pillar is indeed a light pillar that was produced when someone broke through the Xuanzuan realm. It's just that the way it appeared is a little strange." Huangfu Wuji frowned. "His Majesty Emperor Qing has arrived." The gathered crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. From inside the throne room, a terrifying aura swept out. A blue light appeared in front of everyone and finally turned into a blue figure. It was Emperor Qing. "Your Majesty Emperor Qing, what's going on? Someone actually made a breakthrough in the Imperial City, but we can't see where the person is." Huangfu Wudao asked, a little surprised. At this moment, Emperor Qing's eyes flashed, and there was a trace of doubt between his eyebrows. He was also a little surprised that this light pillar had suddenly appeared in the void, and was even a little baffled. Seeing the puzzled look on Emperor Qing's face, Huangfu Wudao and Huangfu Wuji also knew that Emperor Qing was not clear about this phenomenon. This made the two of them even more puzzled. Boom! A sound like muffled thunder came from the crack in the void. At the top of the light pillar, an even larger crack appeared, and from that crack, a light figure slowly descended. A nascent soul has descended from the heavens. Chapter 799. Partial Concretization. Kacha. A crisp voice slowly resounded through the clouds. At the end of the light pillar, a huge crack suddenly appeared in the illusory void, and a figure of light slowly descended from the crack. If one looked carefully, this light figure was actually the image of a baby. This baby's face was blurry and its body was curled up. Its eyes were closed, as if it was still in the womb of a pregnant woman. Who broke through to the Xuanzuan realm? Huangfu Wuji looked at the descending nascent soul with a head full of fog. Once the nascent soul descends, we will know who broke through. Huangfu Wudao's eyes were cold as he indifferently said. At the same time, the crowd that had gathered in the imperial city also looked at the descending nascent soul with anticipation. Their thoughts were similar to Huangfu Wudao's. Once the nascent soul descended, it would be clear who the master of the breakthrough was. However, when the nascent soul descended, a crack in the Dao Kong space appeared. Then, the nascent soul drilled into the crack in space and completely disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. This nascent soul disappeared just like that? Everyone was stunned. Even Emperor Qing frowned. He was somewhat puzzled by this phenomenon in the sky. Your Majesty Emperor Qing, what is going on? Huangfu Wudao couldn't help but ask. Emperor Qing shook his head and lightly said, the descent of this nascent soul is quite strange. I can't find the source. Huangfu Wudao and Huangfu Wuji looked at each other and saw the astonishment in each other's eyes. Even Emperor Qing couldn't figure out the appearance of the breakthrough. Who was it that caused it? It was actually so mysterious. All right, everyone disperse. Emperor Qing waved his hand. Suddenly, the numerous powerhouses of the imperial city that had gathered outside the throne room all left. After all, Emperor Qing had spoken, so they naturally didn't dare to disobey. Huangfu Wuji originally wanted to leave with the crowd, but he was stopped by Huangfu Wudao. Huangfu Wudao said, Second brother, Emperor Qing is looking for you. Hearing this, Huangfu Wuji's eyes were filled with confusion. He walked in front of Emperor Qing and said, Your Majesty, why are you looking for me? Jiaxin Academy has 5 spots for the examination. Zhuan disappeared for no reason, so 1 spot is empty. This emperor intends to give this spot to you. Cyan Emperor waved his right hand and a seal of light shot into Zhuowen's palm. This was the seal of the excellent Divine Institute that he had given to Zhuowen and the others. This seal was the pass to enter the excellent Divine Institute. Thank you, Your Majesty. Huangfu Wuji was stunned for a moment before his face filled with ecstasy. He never thought that he would have the chance to obtain the qualifications to participate in the entrance examination of the Holy God Academy. All right. There's only half a year left before the assessment. Use this time to cultivate properly and don't bring shame to our imperial family. Go. With that, the Lotus Emperor turned into a beam of green light and disappeared into the depths of the throne room. Jun, you didn't expect me to take your spot, did you? You deserve it. Whether you're missing or dead, you will never have the chance to enter the excellent Divine Institute. Huangfu Wuji happily laughed. With a single step, he returned to the imperial city and returned to his own palace. He had to step up his training. He hoped that in half a year, he would be able to have a good performance when he went to the Divine Academy. In the depths of the throne room, there was an endless sea of magma. Terrifying waves of magma roiled about, and in the skies above the sea of magma, there were 81 dragons' auras that intertwined with each other, creating a terrifying waterfall of magma. In the skies above the sea of magma, a crack suddenly appeared. Then, a dazzling mass of light shot out. If one looked carefully, they would see that this mass of light was the nascent soul. The nascent soul's speed was extremely fast. It flew over the sea of magma, heading towards a giant rock at the edge of the sea. At this moment, there was a figure sitting cross-legged on top of the rock. It was like a statue, motionless. In an instant, the dazzling nascent soul drilled into the top of this figure's head. Then, the stone-like figure slowly opened its eyes. A terrifying aura gushed out, pervading the entire sea of magma. What a powerful aura! Is this the strength of a martial artist from the Xuanzuan realm? Zhuan silently felt the power within his body transform. Especially when the nascent soul drilled into his body, he could feel an extremely cool and refreshing feeling. Then, he discovered that the nascent soul that fell from the sky followed his meridians and entered his dantian. Finally, the nascent soul attached itself to his dantian. Furthermore, Zhuowen also discovered that the moment the nascent soul entered his dantian, It actually began to absorb the origin energy in his dantian like crazy. However, while the nascent soul was absorbing the origin energy, it was also constantly releasing the nascent soul's power. The rich power of the nascent soul was much stronger and purer than yuan energy. The two were not on the same level at all. After half an hour of conversion, the yuan energy within his dantian had been completely absorbed by the nascent soul. However, Yuan did not look weak at all. Instead, he became even more energetic, as if he was full of energy. A ray of light shot out from the depths of Zhuowen's eyebrows. Finally, it turned into a broken jade cauldron in front of him. It was the jade cauldron armor spirit that had always existed in his sea of consciousness. Has the armor spirit materialized? As he spoke, Zhuowen's gaze landed on Xiaohei, who was not far away. Zhuowen was not very interested in the materialized jade cauldron armor spirit. This jade cauldron was not very useful to him now. He was mainly looking forward to seeing how powerful Xiaohei would be after she materialized. After all, Xiaohei's origin was very extraordinary. The dragon soul that she materialized would definitely be very powerful. However, what made Zhuowen speechless was that Xiaohei was still looking at him with her legs crossed. She was leisurely lying on a rock, as if she was enjoying the heat waves brought by the surrounding magma. Kid, why are you looking at me like that? Although I am indeed handsome and powerful, you don't have to keep staring at me like that, right? Xiaohei also noticed Zhuowen's gaze. She curled the corners of her mouth and said rather heartlessly. Looking at Xiaohei's appearance, Yuan was speechless. He said somewhat helplessly, I have already successfully advanced to the Xuanzuan realm. Why haven't you revealed your true form and successfully materialized? Patting her butt, Xiaohei came to Zhuowen's shoulder and chuckled, Kid, why are you in such a hurry? It's still too early to materialize this dragon lord. The power of the Four Supremes is still too weak for me. It's not enough to completely materialize this dragon lord. If you really plan to materialize, I'm afraid your vitality will be greatly damaged when the time comes. Hearing this, Zhuowen frowned slightly and asked, Is it that serious? Isn't the general materialization of the armor spirit at the Four Supremes? Why do you have to be such a troublesome person? You already said that it's an ordinary armor spirit. To tell you the truth, some armor spirits that are born extremely powerful will take a longer time to materialize. The main reason is that the armor spirit is too powerful. The power of the Four Supremes is simply unable to control such a powerful armor spirit. In the end, it will only harm others and oneself. Xiaohei shook her head. Then what cultivation level do I need to materialize you? Zhuowen asked. Xiaohei said plainly, you need to be at least in the Emperor realm. However, I'm talking about complete materialization. Now that you're in the Four Supremes, you can partially materialize this Dragon Lord. That way, you should be able to withstand this Dragon Lord's soul power. Hearing this, Zhuowen raised his eyebrows. This was the first time he had heard of partial materialization. His face was filled with curiosity. Partial materialization of the armor spirit can't exist on its own. It must be attached to the host's body. You won't understand even if I tell you now. I'll let you experience the effects of partial materialization first. With that, Xiaohei suddenly turned into a black light and rushed into the surface of Zhuowen's body. A strange black light covered Zhuowen's entire body. Hiss! At the same time, Yuan felt a heart-wrenching pain. It was as if thousands of ants were eating away at his heart. He could clearly feel that every inch of his skin was being gnawed away. It was extremely painful. Xiaohei, what are you doing? Why is it so painful? Zhuowen's eyes were filled with fear. The pain made him want to commit suicide. Bear with it for a while longer. It'll be over soon. Xiaohei's voice slowly sounded. Zhuowen could only grit his teeth and endure. He let out a roar that didn't sound like a human's voice. It sounded extremely chilling and terrifying. With the passage of time, the ink-black luster around Zhuowen's body gradually faded away, and the extreme pain also gradually receded like the tide. When Zhuowen looked at his own body, he couldn't help but gasp. At this moment, his entire body had changed drastically. His hands and feet were covered with ink-black scales. Traces of cold light were emitted from the scales. On his elbows and knees, there was a black spike growing out of each of them. In addition to his elbows and knees, Zhuowen's back also had ferocious bone spikes. It looked extremely horrifying. Moreover, Yuan also realized that he had a huge dragon tail on his back. He looked like a dragon man and not a normal human. Is this what you meant by partial realization? Looking at the huge changes in his body, Yuan was first surprised. Then he calmed down. He kind of understood what Xiao He meant by partial realization. As it couldn't be fully realized, a part of the characteristics of the armor soul would be attached to the host. It would allow the host and the armor soul to become one. This was the principle behind the increase in combat power. Zhuowen could clearly feel that after a part of Xiao He's materialization had attached itself to his body, his strength had become many times stronger than before. In your current state as a dragon man, whether it's in terms of sensitivity, speed, or strength, they have far surpassed the Xuanzuan realm. Even a supreme being is no match for you. If you use your trump card, you can actually fight a golden supreme being. Chapter 800. Subdue the dragon's might. He's actually so strong. Upon hearing Xiao He's words, Zhuowen's heart was filled with excitement. Just a partial realization already possessed such terrifying power. What would happen if Xiao He fully realized? Wouldn't that be heaven-defying? Also, your Supreme Dragon Cauldron is not a useless armor soul. It's just that it's too dilapidated now, so it looks useless. Xiao He suddenly pointed at the jade cauldron not far away. Zhuowen asked doubtfully, "What's so good about this jade cauldron? I really can't see what special abilities he has." The Supreme Dragon Cauldron is a treasure of heaven and earth, and it is also the nemesis of the dragon race. It has the power to suppress 10,000 dragons. Your Supreme Dragon Cauldron can control true dragons for your use. Don't you think it's amazing? Xiao He said calmly. It is indeed powerful, but where did the true dragon come from? Also, this jade cauldron is too shabby. It doesn't look like a treasure at all. Zhuowen was still skeptical. Xiao He shook its head, feeling somewhat disappointed. Soon after, it pointed its little claw at the 81 strands of dragon might in the sea of lava and said, "Although the Supreme Dragon Cauldron is much more damaged, suppressing those tiny strands of dragon might is not a problem. By relying on this Supreme Dragon Cauldron, you can completely subdue those 81 strands of dragon might for your own use. Don't underestimate that dragon's might. After all, it's the dragon's might released by a true dragon when it was still alive. It's extremely powerful," Xiao He said calmly. "You're saying that this broken cauldron can subdue the 81 terrifying dragon auras?" Zhuowen's eyes lit up and he asked with some doubt. "You'll know once you try." Xiao He did not say much. After peeling herself off from Zhuowen's body, she reverted back to Xiao He's dog form. She sat on Zhuowen's shoulder with a look that said, "Believe it or not, it's up to you. Let's give it a try." Although he was skeptical, Yuan was also rather eager for those 81 strands of dragon might. He could feel the powerful might of those dragon might. If he could subdue them for his own use, it would definitely be of great benefit. With a stomp of his feet, Yuan carried the broken jade cauldron in his right hand and flew towards the sea of lava like a giant rock. Zhuowen's arrival immediately attracted the attention of the 81 dragon mights not far away. However, to Zhuowen's surprise, these dragon mights merely glanced at Zhuowen lazily and ignored him. It just so happens that I can try to see if this Supreme Dragon Cauldron can subdue the dragon might. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up as he looked at the dragon aura that didn't seem to care. He suddenly arrived above the nearest dragon aura. The dragon's enormous eyes stared coldly at Zhuowen. It suddenly swung its tail, which was as huge as a pillar that supported the heavens. It swept toward Zhuowen with great force. Zhuowen was not afraid. He held the jade cauldron in his right hand and blocked it in front of him. At the same time, he had already put up layers of protection around his body. He was already prepared to take the attack if the jade cauldron was unable to subdue the dragon might. Boom! When the dragon's tail came in contact with the jade cauldron, the dragon's might revealed a look of fear and cried out repeatedly. A terrifying suction force swept out from the jade cauldron and instantly swept the dragon's might in. The dragon's might wanted to escape, but unfortunately, the suction force was too terrifying. The more the dragon's might struggled, the stronger the suction force became. In the end, Yuan was shocked to find that the dragon's might below was completely sucked into the jade cauldron without any resistance. It was sucked in so easily. Is this jade cauldron actually so powerful? Yuan was stunned as he looked at the dragon's might that was instantly sucked in. A black light swept over and turned into Xiao Hei's appearance. Xiao Hei slowly patted Zhuowen's shoulder and said with a smile, "Now you know how powerful this Supreme Dragon Cauldron is. With this Supreme Dragon Cauldron, you can easily subdue the dragon's might and make it fight for you." Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He finally understood what Xiao Hei meant. The Supreme Dragon Cauldron was not an offensive treasure, but more like an auxiliary treasure. Moreover, it was extremely restraining against the Dragon Clan. With the Supreme Dragon Cauldron, he could use it to subdue the Dragon Clan and fight for him. Moreover, there seemed to be no limit to the number of dragons. However, what made Zhuowen a little helpless was that the Dragon Clan had disappeared a long time ago. It was really difficult to subdue the Dragon Clan. However, Zhuowen also knew that the current Supreme Dragon Cauldron was too broken. If he encountered the Dragon Clan, it would not be of much use. Although it is a little unrealistic to subdue the Dragon Clan, it is still possible to subdue the dragon's might. As he spoke, Yuan stared at the remaining dragon's might in front of him. His eyes were full of desire. If he could subdue all of these dragon's might, it would be of great help to him. Yuan instantly subdued a dragon's might. It was as if he had poked a hornet's nest. The remaining dragon's might roared angrily and immediately rushed towards Yuan. The human in front of them was too abominable. They did not provoke this person, but this person dared to touch their companion. This was really unforgivable. "Come on!" Zhuowen shouted. With the jade cauldron in his left hand and the bone spear in his right hand, he rushed towards the remaining dragon's might like the wind. Bang! A huge dragon's tail smashed towards him, but Zhuowen was not afraid at all. He held the jade cauldron in his left hand and placed it in front of him. A terrifying suction force came from the jade cauldron. The dragon's might screamed and was directly sucked into the jade cauldron. These dragons' might were indeed extremely terrifying. If it were not for the Supreme Dragon Cauldron, even if Zhuowen had broken through to the Xuanzuan realm, he would be courting death if he wanted to deal with these dragons' might. Unfortunately, with the powerful suppressive effect of the Supreme Dragon Cauldron, the dragon's might could only be exerted by about 10%. In front of Zhuowen now, it was simply being abused. In less than half an hour, the remaining dragon's might had been sucked into the Supreme Dragon Cauldron by Zhuowen. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen returned to the rock at the edge of the magma sea. Dragon roars were constantly coming out from the Supreme Dragon Cauldron. The 81 dragons' might that had been subdued were constantly struggling to get out of the Supreme Dragon Cauldron. Unfortunately, it was simply a waste of effort. These dragons' might are wild and untamed. I'm afraid it will take a lot of time to completely refine it and let you use it, Xiao Hei said faintly as she stared at the Supreme Dragon Cauldron that was constantly shaking. Zhuowen nodded. He also knew that it was not that easy to completely tame these dragons' might. However, as long as he spent some time, the dragon's might would naturally be completely used by him. In addition to the function of subduing the Dragon Clan, your Supreme Dragon Cauldron also contains an extremely rich dragon aura. The dragon aura has immeasurable benefits to these dragons' might. If you cultivate it well, the strength of these dragons' might will continue to increase. It will also be of great help to you in the future. Xiao Hei's words surprised Zhuowen. Naturally, Zhuowen knew about the dragon aura in the Supreme Dragon Cauldron. When he was cultivating the immemorial dragon roar fist, he had relied on the dragon aura of the 5-clawed golden dragon in the jade cauldron to cultivate it to perfection. I didn't expect the dragon aura in the jade cauldron to have such a benefit, Zhuowen muttered. Alright, the dragon's might has been completely subdued by you. Moreover, you have also successfully broken through to the Xuanzuan realm. Then, prepare to go down to the bottom of the magma sea to take a look. There will definitely be a real dragon's corpse down there. That's good stuff. At this point, Xiao Hei rubbed her hands excitedly, looking like a money grubber. A real dragon's corpse? I'll go down and take a look. Zhuowen's eyes were also filled with anticipation. A real dragon's corpse was a powerful existence that he had never seen before. Today, he might have the chance to see it once. Although it was just a corpse, it was still extremely fresh for Zhuowen. Plop! Without the slightest hesitation, Zhuowen suddenly dove into the ocean of lava. At the same time that he dove into the ocean of lava, Zhuowen executed the rebirth of the Grand Sun to the limit. Moreover, he even summoned the Infinity Sword formation to revolve around his body, and it formed an impenetrable wall that was impregnable. What a high temperature! The moment Zhuowen dived into the magma sea, he felt an extremely terrifying temperature eroding towards him. Fortunately, he had 2 layers of protection. Coupled with his strong physical body, he didn't feel the slightest bit of discomfort. During the process of diving, Zhuowen's sharp senses kept probing his surroundings, just in case. This magma sea covered a large area. Zhuowen didn't believe that there wouldn't be any danger in this magma sea. Therefore, he was extremely cautious. Time passed by minute. Soon, Zhuowen had already dived a few hundred meters, but he still hadn't reached the bottom. Zhuowen was still calm as he slowly dived. For hours later, Zhuowen had already dived nearly 1,000 meters, but he still hadn't reached the bottom. He couldn't help but frown. What a deep magma sea! I've already dived nearly 1,000 meters, but I still haven't reached the bottom. Muttering to himself, Zhuowen continued diving. He also discovered that the deeper he dived, the more terrifying the temperature of the magma became. Something is approaching, and it's moving very fast. Suddenly, Xiao Hei's voice rang out, startling Zhuowen. His gaze became even more vigilant, and at the same time, he was constantly paying attention to the movements around him. After 10 breaths, Zhuowen sensed a mysterious creature dozens of meters away. It was like an arrow that had been released from a bow. Its speed was unbelievably fast. Bang! In an instant, the mysterious creature collided with the Greater Infinity Sword formation. Immediately, the huge Greater Infinity Sword formation trembled violently, and the brilliance on its surface gradually dimmed. The Greater Infinity Sword formation was originally resisting the high temperature of the surrounding magma, but it was already on the verge of collapse. Now, with the impact of the mysterious creature, the situation of the Greater Infinity Sword formation became even worse. What kind of creature is attacking me? Zhuowen turned around and looked behind him. He immediately saw the true appearance of the mysterious creature. It was a huge python, and the strange thing was that this python had 3 heads. At this moment, its 6 triangular eyes were constantly staring at Zhuowen. Chapter 801. Blue Dragon Palace. The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake was a powerful meta beast. It was said that it was born with the strength of an ultimate king realm beast. Once it reached maturity, it would reach the peak of the ultimate king realm beast. The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake in front of him was undoubtedly a mature 3-headed flaming spiritual snake. Its strength should be at the peak of the ultimate king realm. Logically speaking, a 3-headed flaming spiritual snake with such strength would not pose much of a threat to Zhuowen. Unfortunately, the 3-headed flaming spiritual snake was an indigenous creature of the magma sea. Although it was not strong, it had the geographical advantage and its speed was much more terrifying. Swoosh! The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake stared coldly at Zhuowen. It spat out its tongue as if it was staring at its beloved prey. I'm afraid you will regret treating me as your prey. Zhuowen snorted and stomped his feet in the magma. With the help of the strong buoyancy, he quickly flew towards the 3-headed flaming spiritual snake. The terrifying strength even stirred the surrounding magma into a terrifying whirlpool. The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake's eyes flickered and revealed a rare look of fear. It could feel that the human in front of it was extremely powerful, so it did not plan to meet force with force. Swoosh! In an instant, the 3-headed flaming spirit serpent turned into a shadow and dodged Zhuowen's attack. With a hissing sound, it bombarded Zhuowen's greater limitless sword formation from the side. Bang! The three-headed flaming spiritual snake's attack actually caused Zhuowen's body to sway. He could not help but fly to the side. The ultimate sword formation finally dimmed under this attack. It disintegrated into countless cold lights and entered Zhuowen's spiritual ring. This damned beast, it's actually so agile. With a stomp of his feet, Yuan barely stabilized his body. His gaze was extremely gloomy. In the magma sea, his movements were greatly hindered. The three-headed flaming spiritual snake's speed was too fast. It was impossible for him to dodge the latter's attack. Boom! Another sound of water splashing was heard. The three-headed flame spirit serpent launched another surprise attack. Zhuan only felt a huge force coming from behind him. His whole body was hit and he staggered. When he turned around, he saw the three-headed flaming spirit serpent staring at him in confusion. The flaming spirit serpent had used all of its strength just now, thinking that it could definitely kill the human in front of it. However, it did not realize that the human's body was so tough that it could not break through the latter's physical defense. While the flame spirit serpent was in a daze, a dazzling golden arm suddenly stretched out and pinched the flame spirit serpent's tail. Hiss! The flame spirit serpent immediately cried out in fear when its tail was pinched. It wanted to struggle and escape, but it was horrified to find that the golden arm was like an iron hoop, firmly holding it in place, causing it to be unable to move. You want to run after hitting me? Do you think it's that easy? Zhuowen's face was expressionless as he exerted force with his right hand. The three-headed flame spirit serpent was instantly pinched in his hand. Following that, Yuan hammered down with his other 7 arms. A terrifying force erupted, forming a violent magma vortex in the surroundings. Puchi! As expected, the three-headed flame spirit serpent was directly torn apart by Zhun. It turned into a cloud of blood mist and dyed the surrounding magma a demonic blood red. Zhuowen's face was expressionless. After tearing apart the three-headed flame spirit serpent, he continued to dive downwards. However, his expression was even more cautious and careful. He had already encountered the 3 fire spiritual gods before reaching the bottom of the magma sea. He did not know if there was an even more terrifying danger at the bottom. The moment Zhuan killed the three-headed flame spirit serpent, figures suddenly surged around the magma sea, stirring up a magma tsunami above the magma sea. Following that, these squirming figures rushed towards the bottom of the magma sea at an extremely fast speed. The direction that these figures rushed towards was where the three-headed flame spirit serpent was killed by Zhun. 6 hours later, Yuan finally reached the bottom of the magma sea. When his feet touched the ground, Yuan could not help but let out a sigh of relief. He had finally reached the bottom. Through his senses, Zhuan discovered that the bottom of the magma sea was actually filled with countless oddly shaped reefs. There were even huge deep pits that looked bumpy, just like an ancient battlefield. Keep moving forward. I can sense that there is an extremely dense real dragon aura in front. Xiao He suddenly pointed to the front and said. Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. He took a step forward and his entire body turned into a shadow as he rushed forward. After half an hour, Yuan arrived before an extremely deep valley. Yuan was standing at the edge of the valley. This valley was extremely vast and there were strange rocks all around. Very soon, Zhuowen's gaze gathered at the center of the valley. His mouth was slightly agape as he revealed a shocked expression. This was because in the center of the valley, an extremely huge bone dragon was quietly hovering. This bone dragon was almost a few thousand feet in size. Zhuan stood in front of this huge bone dragon and felt that he was as tiny as an ant. This is the real dragon's corpse? It's so huge and spectacular. Looking at the huge bone dragon's corpse that appeared in the center of the valley, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with shock. His heart could not help but tremble. Don't make a fuss. The real dragon's body size is basically measured in units of thousands of feet. The stronger the strength, the more terrifying the real dragon's body size is. Some real dragons that have cultivated to become spirits can even reach a size of close to 10,000 feet. It's extremely terrifying. Xiao He stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and rolled her eyes at Zhuan in disdain. She thought that Zhuan was making a fuss over nothing. Kid, look at the forehead of the real dragon's corpse. There seems to be something there. Xiao Hei suddenly extended her small claw and pointed at the bone dragon's forehead. Following Xiao Hei's little claw, Zhuo Wen's gaze landed on the space between the bone dragon's eyebrows. He was immediately stunned because there was actually a rather large cave between the bone dragon's eyebrows, and above the cave were 3 bold and forceful words. Azure Dragon Hall? Zhuan murmured to himself as a gleam of light erupted from his eyes. Did these 3 words mean that there was a hall called the Azure Dragon Hall in the depths of the bone dragon's forehead? Just who was it that dug a hole in the bone dragon's forehead and built this so-called Azure Dragon Hall? Zhuan asked in doubt. Xiao Hei's gaze became rather stern. She said, the bodies of true dragons are extremely tough. Emperors are unable to leave behind any imprints on the bone dragon's corpse, yet this person was able to dig a hole in the bone dragon's forehead. Only a saint can do that. What? Xiao Hei, you mean to say that the one who built this so-called Azure Dragon Hall is a saint? Zhuan asked in surprise. It's very likely. The owner of this Azure Dragon Hall is very likely a saint, and an extremely powerful one at that. Xiao Hei's voice became grave. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly as he muttered to himself. In other words, this true dragon was killed by that saint? Isn't that too powerful? He can even kill a true dragon? Suddenly, Xiao Hei sneered and said indifferently, Kid, you're thinking too much. It's impossible for a mere saint to have the ability to kill a true dragon because even the weakest true dragon is no weaker than a saint, and the strongest true dragon is already comparable to a god-rank powerhouse. This true dragon's corpse was extremely powerful when it was alive. Although its strength couldn't compare to a god-rank powerhouse, it was already hard to find a match among saints. It's impossible for a mere saint to kill this true dragon. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, this true dragon's corpse should be an azure dragon. The azure dragon is an extremely terrifying dragon race. In front of it, even a saint might not be its match. Hearing this, the shock in Zhuowen's eyes became even more intense. This azure dragon was so terrifying? Even a saint might not be a match for it? Then just how terrifying was this azure dragon? Then what's going on with this Azure Dragon Hall? Since the Azure Dragon was so terrifying, why would a saint open up a cave in between its eyebrows and build the Azure Dragon Hall? Hee. The owner of the Azure Dragon Hall must have found the Azure Dragon's corpse and then built a cave in between the Azure Dragon's eyebrows. However, the owner of the Azure Dragon Hall should also be an extraordinary figure. He dared to build a cave in the Azure Dragon's corpse. His courage is outstanding, and his strength is definitely not weak. Otherwise, it would be impossible for this Azure Dragon Hall to not be coveted by others. At this point, Xiao Hei's eyes revealed a rare look of contemplation. Then let's enter the Azure Dragon Hall and take a look. After all, this is a cave opened up by a saint. Perhaps there are many good things inside. At this point, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with a blazing light. This was a saint's cave. No matter what, the things inside would not be bad. Let's go in and take a look. However, you need to be careful. After all, a saint's cave is not so easy to break into. I'm afraid there will be many dangers inside. Xiao Hei reminded. Nodding his head, Zhuan was about to rush towards the Azure Dragon Hall in the sky when a sharp sound of something breaking through the air came from behind, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink. With a shift of his feet, he instantly moved several feet to the side. Sizzle! 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 The place where Zhuan was just now was suddenly hit by a purple liquid. It actually emitted a terrifying corrosive sound. In an instant, that place was actually corroded into a deep pit that was several feet deep. Who is it? Turning around abruptly, Zhuowen's eyes gradually turned cold. This purple venom seemed to be very toxic. If he were to be directly hit by it, he would probably be in an extremely sorry state. Dozens of meters behind him, there was an extremely large three-headed flaming spirit serpent. It was spitting out its tongue and staring coldly at Zhuan. Another three-headed flaming spirit serpent? Looking at the three-headed flaming spirit serpent dozens of meters away, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. However, the three-headed flaming spirit serpent in front of him was several times larger than the three-headed flaming spirit serpent that he had just killed. Its body was also much stronger. Even the aura on its body was much more terrifying. This is probably the three-headed flaming spirit serpent king. Kid, you have to be careful. Xiao He suddenly said. It's the serpent king? Then what you mean is… Zhuowen's pupils shrank slightly as an ominous premonition flashed in his heart. He knew that the three-headed flaming spirit serpent was a type of meta-beast that lived in groups. If the three-headed flaming spirit serpent king existed, then the other three-headed flaming spirit serpents would not be far away. Chapter 802. Serpent. Looking at the three-headed flaming spiritual serpents that appeared behind the serpent king, Zhuowen's eyes were extremely gloomy. He made a rough estimate and realized that there were 3 digits of three-headed flaming spiritual serpents in front of him. Human, you are bold to kill my people. You are courting death. A rather immature voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen could not help but narrow his eyes as he stared at the Snake King in the lead. He knew that the owner of the voice should be the Snake King. However, he was puzzled. Isn't the Serpent King an adult? Why is its voice so childish, as though it is an infant? It was your people who attacked me first. I was only retaliating. Although there are many of you, it is impossible for you to kill me. I advise you to retreat. Otherwise, it will be too late for regrets. Zhuowen shook his head and transmitted his voice to the Serpent King. Although there were many three-headed flaming spiritual serpents, it was a pity that Zhuowen's physical body was so terrifying that the flaming spiritual serpents did not pose much of a threat to him. Even though the flaming spiritual serpent king had the strongest aura and its strength should be around the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm, such strength did not pose much of a threat to Zhuowen. You want us to retreat? Human, you are too arrogant and ignorant. Today, I will show you the terror of the flaming spiritual serpents. Don't beg for mercy when you die because it will be useless. After the three-headed flaming spiritual serpent king finished its sentence, it shrieked. Instantly, the countless flaming spiritual serpents behind it shrieked as well. Soon after, the sound of the air breaking was heard and they plunged towards Yun. In that case, I will not be courteous. Seeing that the three-headed flaming spiritual serpent king was so stubborn, Yun did not want to say anything more. He stomped his feet and displayed the nirvana of the sun. He transformed into a 4-headed, 8-armed serpent king with 8 spears and charged forward fearlessly. 8 cold lights flashed past. Instantly, 8 three-headed flaming spiritual serpents turned into a cloud of blood and died a violent death. This is just the beginning. Since you are willing to die, Yun will accompany you to the end. With a cold smile, Yun waved his spear again and displayed the spear essence of perfection. Spear essence of flaming spiritual serpents surrounded him. Countless blue crystals surrounded him were like the toughest ice. As soon as the spear intent domain appeared, a terrifying explosion followed. Instantly, the dozens of three-headed flaming spirit serpents that were charging at the front exploded into a bloody mist before they could even make a sound. A figure suddenly rushed out from the blood mist. He brandished his spear and shot out countless cold lights. The flame spirit serpents that were charging forward were basically slaughtered one-sidedly. In flaming spiritual serpent spiritual, in the spiritual serpent blood spiritual serpents, serpent demon serpents, spiritual serpents, spiritual king spiritual serpents, flaming spiritual serpents, flaming of serpents spiritual serpents, the serpent serpents in. Kill this human. The serpent king shrieked again. Although many of the remaining flaming spiritual serpents were afraid, they had no choice but to charge forward and fight under the Serpent King's tyrannical power. Zhuowen was not afraid at all. He shouted in a low voice, 8,000 feet tall body. As he spoke, his body rose from the ground and actually transformed into a 300-meter tall figure. He was like a giant mountain that was as tall as the sky. His feet suddenly stomped on the ground, causing the entire ground to tremble violently. All of you die. As Zhuowen spoke, his 8 spears smashed down together. The terrifying power swept out, causing the surrounding magma to tumble violently. It was as if the entire magma field was going to be turned upside down. Instantly, the flame spirit serpents that were charging over were all turned into clouds of blood mist. Instantly, there were only a dozen or so flame spirit serpents left. It looked like there were very few of them left. Hiss hiss hiss. The remaining dozen flaming spiritual serpents let out sorrowful cries. Their eyes were filled with fear. They swung their tails and fled. The human in front of them was too terrifying. They had been surrounded by so many flaming spiritual serpents, but they were all killed in an instant. It was too terrifying. The Serpent King's face changed drastically. Its body flashed and it wanted to escape. Zhuowen's power made its heart tremble and fear. "You want to leave? You'd better stay here," Zhuowen shouted. He stomped his feet and instantly blocked the Serpent King's path. He stretched out his golden arm and grabbed the Serpent King. Hiss hiss hiss. The Serpent King shrieked and its 3 heads spat out purplish-black venom. It wanted to completely corrode Zhuowen's arm. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's golden arm was as strong as steel. Although the purplish venom was strong, it had no effect on Zhuowen's arm. With a slap of his right hand, the purplish venom was blown away. Zhuowen pressed down on the Serpent King without hesitation. He immediately grabbed the 3 heads of the Serpent King and stared coldly at the latter. "Human warrior, let me go, I won't provoke you in the future." The Serpent King was finally afraid and quickly hissed. However, Zhuowen sneered and said, "Towards those who want to kill me, I have always chosen to return an eye for an eye. Now you can leave your last words." "Human, you can't kill me. If you kill me, you will regret it. I am a soaring serpent." Before the Serpent King could finish speaking, Zhuowen's right hand suddenly exerted force and instantly crushed the Serpent King's body, turning it into a cloud of rolling blood mist. "I don't care what you are. If you provoke me, Zhun, the outcome will be the same." After saying this indifferently, Zhuowen's huge body slowly descended and finally turned into the size of a normal person. With a stomp of his foot, his entire body rushed towards the true dragon's corpse in the valley. To him, the 3-headed flaming spiritual Serpent King was just an insignificant interlude. Right now, his main focus was on the Azure Dragon Palace. When he arrived at the space between the Bone Dragon's eyebrows, Zhuowen discovered that the cave in front of him was actually so huge. It was 100 feet tall and 30 feet wide. Especially the 3 large words Azure Dragon Palace above the cave, it was vigorous and powerful, emitting a powerful aura. "I wonder what exactly exists in this Azure Dragon Palace?" A fiery gaze appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. With a stomp of his foot, he wanted to directly enter the cave. Dang dang dang. The instant Zhuowen approached the cave, a transparent light barrier appeared on the surface of the cave, causing Zhuowen to hit a wall. After stabilizing his body, Zhuowen's gaze converged on the light barrier that appeared out of nowhere and said, "This is a restriction?" Xiaohei also came out at this moment and flew in front of the restriction. Her black eyes were filled with a trace of seriousness as she said, "Kid, this restriction is not simple. Do you have a way to deal with it?" Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he asked. Zhuowen was a complete novice when it came to formations and restrictions. He did not know anything about them, so he could only leave it to Xiaohei to deal with. "I do, but it will take a lot of time." Xiaohei nodded and said solemnly. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded and said, "Then you go ahead and study it first. I can use this time to properly consolidate the Xuanzuan realm. After all, I've only just advanced to Mystique Venerable rank." With that, Zhuowen silently sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. He began to silently cultivate and recuperate, not disturbing Xiaohei when she was studying the restriction. The terrain in the northern polar region of the magma sea was extremely strange. There was a huge abyss there, and in the depths of the abyss, there was a huge suction force that caused the magma above the abyss to churn wantonly, forming a terrifying whirlpool. All of a sudden, the vortex above the abyss came to a strange stop. Then, a furious and terrifying voice came from the depths of the abyss. It was like a rumbling thunderclap. "Who is it? Who dares to kill my bloodline? Rumble!" A huge and terrifying figure that was close to 10,000 feet tall rushed out of the abyss, sweeping up a torrent of magma. Then this huge figure rushed toward the center of the magma sea. In the valley, Yuan silently sat cross-legged and slowly opened his eyes. There was a gleam of joy in his eyes. He had been sitting here for half a day, relying on the rich draconic energy here to completely consolidate the Xuanzuan realm. Xiao He, are you not done yet? Zhuan could not help but ask when he turned his head and saw that Xiao He was still focused on studying the restriction outside the cave. It's almost done. This forbidden method is quite brilliant, and there are quite a few traps buried inside, causing this dragon lord to make a few mistakes. But now that I've found the right method, it should be done soon. Xiao He replied casually. Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. He was not in a hurry. After all, the Azure Dragon Hall was right in front of him. Sooner or later he would break in. However, for some reason, his right eyelid had been twitching nonstop since just now, as if an unknown danger was constantly approaching him. Is it my imagination? Zhuan frowned and muttered to himself. Rumble. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the entire valley. The ground of the valley began to crack under the violent tremor. Extremely ferocious cracks appeared on the ground. What's going on? Zhuan suddenly stood up, and his eyes were filled with surprise and bewilderment. This sudden vibration was too strange. Following that, Zhuan discovered that a huge figure was slowly appearing above the valley. This huge figure was nearly 3,000 meters tall, almost covering the sky and covering the sun. Looking at the huge figure that had suddenly appeared in front of him, Zhuan's pupils constricted and his mouth opened slightly. A strong sense of danger surfaced in his heart. The huge figure that appeared above the valley had a huge snake's body that was nearly 3,000 meters long. Its green scales flickered with a terrifying cold light. What was even stranger was that on the back of this huge snake, there was actually a pair of flame wings that were thousands of meters long. They looked dazzling and brilliant. When he saw such a huge exotic beast suddenly appear in the sky above the valley, an ancient saying couldn't help but appear in Zhuan's mind. The flying serpent has no feet to fly, the Wu Shu has no 5 skills to use. Chapter 803. A dead emperor-level expert looking up at the humongous flying serpent, Zhuan's heart could not help but tremble. This flying serpent was too humongous. The aura it faintly emitted caused his entire body to tremble. This was the terrifying aura of a powerful creature. There is actually such a terrifying creature like the flying serpent in this sea of lava. Zhuan muttered to himself as his lips trembled. Human, did you kill my bloodline? The flying serpent looked down at Zhuan. Its huge eyes were filled with coldness and mercilessness. Zhuan's pupils shrank. He was rather puzzled as he said, Your bloodline? I'm afraid you have mistaken me for someone else. I did not kill your bloodline. Boom. The flying serpent roared furiously. A terrifying sound wave formed a ring-shaped air wave that blasted toward Zhuan. This caused Zhuan to involuntarily cover his ears and retreat several steps. 2 streams of blood flowed out from his ears. The might of the flying serpent's roar actually broke Zhuan's eardrums, causing him to involuntarily retreat several steps. You still dare to lie? Outside the valley, there are countless 3-headed flaming spiritual serpents. You said you did not kill them? And the 3-headed flaming spiritual serpent king's corpse is also there. My bloodline flows in its body. You dare to say you did not kill it? Roaring furiously, the flying serpent's huge eyes were filled with anger. A pair of blood-red eyes stared eerily at Zhuan. The 3-headed flaming spiritual serpent king is actually the flying serpent's bloodline. Oh no. Hearing these words, Zhuan's heart clenched. He finally knew that when he killed the 3-headed flaming spiritual serpent king, the latter had said that he could not kill him. Unfortunately, Zhuan did not think too much about it. It was even more impossible for him to imagine that the Serpent King was actually the flying serpent's descendant. However, what made Zhuan puzzled was that if the flying serpent was so powerful, why was the 3-headed flaming spiritual serpent king so weak? In fact, Zhuan had made a mistake. The 3-headed flaming spirit snake king was just a baby. The flying serpent bloodline in its body had not been activated. That was why it was so weak. Of course, this weak was only relative. After all, the three-headed flaming spirit Snake King had the strength of the Xuanzuan realm. It would not be easy to deal with the three-headed flaming spirit Snake King in the Xuanzuan realm. It was a pity that Jun was too abnormal. When he was half a step into the Xuanzuan realm, he had already killed many Xuanzuan realm cultivators. He was even able to fight with early-stage Supreme Being cultivators. Now that Zhuowen had advanced to the Xuanzuan realm, his strength was even more terrifying. It was understandable that the three-headed flaming spirit Snake King was no match for Jun. It was indeed killed by you, you damned human. I only have one descendant who has perfectly inherited my bloodline. However, you killed it. You really deserve to die. Zhuo Wen's expression was naturally captured by the soaring serpent's eyes. With a furious roar, the soaring serpent opened its bloody mouth, and a terrifying pillar of fire suddenly shot out, sweeping toward Zhuo Wen. At the same time, the flying serpent twisted its waist and turned into a huge shadow. It wanted to swallow Zhuo Wen into its stomach. Shahei, hurry up. If the flying serpent catches me, I will definitely die. Zhuo Wen roared furiously. 4 heads and 8 arms were formed. 8 spears were brandished, and he immediately used the peak of spear intent that he was most adept at. He fiercely attacked the pillar of fire that was getting closer and closer. What made Zhuo Wen's pupils shrink was that the 8 spear intent domains were like tofu in front of the pillar of fire. They crumbled inch by inch. Swoosh! The pillar of fire was like a hot knife through butter. After breaking through the spear intent domains, it continued to rush towards Jun. It wanted to devour Zhuo Wen completely. Zhuo Wen roared furiously. A sense of danger rose in his heart. His feet stomped and he hurriedly dodged to the side. Unfortunately, the speed of the pillar of fire was too fast. It arrived in front of Zhuo Wen in an instant. Although Zhuo Wen dodged most of the pillar of fire, his legs were swallowed by the pillar of fire. In the blink of an eye, Zhuo Wen's legs were burned by the pillar of fire and completely turned into ashes. Moreover, the flames were extremely strange. They actually followed Zhuo Wen's calves and spread towards his thighs like maggots. Yun did not hesitate. He fiercely swung the spear in his hands at his legs. His legs were instantly cut off at the knees and fresh blood spurted out. Forcefully enduring the pain in his legs, Zhuan used the Yuan power in his body to staunch the wounds on his legs. However, without his legs, Jun could only lie on the ground and stare helplessly as the soaring serpent approached him. Shahei, are you not done yet? I'm going to die soon. Jun shouted loudly. Looking at the approaching soaring serpent, his eyes were filled with despair. This soaring serpent was so terrifying. It was probably comparable to Emperor Qing's level. In fact, Yuan could even smell the unpleasant stench coming from the soaring serpent's bloody mouth. 100 meters, 70 meters, 50 meters, 30 meters, 10 meters, 10 meters. At this moment, the distance between the soaring serpent and Zhuo Wen was only 10 meters. Zhuo Wen's tiny frame and the gigantic maw of the soaring serpent, at this moment, seemed so incongruous. Human. Those who kill my bloodline must pay the price of death. Go to hell and repent for your mistakes. The soaring serpent's thunderous voice rumbled in Zhuo Wen's ears. At this critical moment, an inky black light instantly wrapped around Chun. Then, taking advantage of the momentum, Zhuo Wen's body rapidly shot towards the Azure Dragon Hall behind him and disappeared without a trace in an instant. Bang! The soaring serpent violently slammed into the true dragon's corpse. The powerful force was actually unable to cause the true dragon's corpse to sway in the slightest. It still stood tall and straight like a mountain, unmoving like a boulder. Oh, this human actually entered the Azure Dragon Hall? The restriction outside was actually broken by him? The soaring serpent's enormous body slowly retreated. Its large eyes stared intently at the entrance of the Azure Dragon Hall. Its gaze was filled with unwillingness and a sinister chill. The true dragon was the natural enemy of the soaring serpent. In ancient times, the soaring serpent was actually the prey of the true dragon. Although the azure dragon in front of it had been dead for hundreds of thousands of years and had already turned into a corpse, the soaring serpent was still somewhat afraid of it. As for entering the azure dragon hall, that was even more impossible. After all, the azure dragon hall was built within the body of the azure dragon. The soaring serpent itself was afraid of the azure dragon, so how could it take the risk and enter the azure dragon hall? Humph! That cunning human cannot possibly hide in the azure dragon hall forever. When he comes out, I will definitely make him die without a burial ground. The soaring serpent roared angrily and slowly descended outside the valley. Its large eyes stared intently at the entrance of the azure dragon hall. If Zhuan appeared, it would definitely not let him off. Whoosh! This was a barren land. A rather miserable figure rushed out from a dark tunnel and violently smashed onto the ground, causing his face to be covered in dust. Xiao Hei, if you had been any slower, I would have become the soaring serpent's meal. The figure that had landed on the ground was naturally Zhuan, who had been brought into the azure dragon hall by Xiao Hei. At this moment, Zhuan's legs were still broken at the knees and looked rather terrifying. However, ever since the blood demon had connected the purple-black heart to his heart meridian, Zhuan's recovery ability was extremely terrifying. His originally broken legs were actually continuously growing from the wounds. In the time it took for an incense stick to burn, a pair of complete calves had actually grown out from the wounds on Zhuan's legs, looking exactly the same as when he had not been injured. Slowly getting up, Zhuan casually jumped a few times. A trace of joy appeared in his eyes. This purple-black heart was really very useful to him. It could even regenerate his broken arms and legs. Speaking of which, he was really a little like an unkillable cockroach. At this moment, Xiao Hei slowly floated in the air in front of him. Her gaze overlooked the barren land with an unprecedented solemnity on her face. Swoosh! Zhuan came to Xiao Hei's side and also looked down at the barren land. He could not help but frown as he said, "This is the interior of the azure dragon hall?" At a glance, what appeared in front of Zhuan was a vast and desolate land filled with ravines, canyons, ruins, deep pits. This was a desolate and dilapidated world. Almost no part of the entire land was intact. It was filled with potholes. It was not hard to imagine what kind of great battle the land had experienced before to create such a terrifying and miserable scene. We entered from the entrance of the Azure Dragon Hall. This land is indeed the interior of the Azure Dragon Hall. This land is very ancient and also very decadent. Xiao Hei said cautiously. Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. He could feel a mournful and resolute feeling from this land that was almost blurry, like a hero past his prime. Raising his head, Zhuan noticed that there was a dazzling meteor shower in the sky above the boundless land. The countless meteor showers were like the most brilliant fireworks, blooming with their own brilliance and glory, forming a sharp contrast with the land. Just what had happened in this space in the past. Looking up at the dazzling sky and overlooking the vast land, a trace of confusion and doubt appeared in Zhuan's eyes. This space definitely had a different story in the past. Look over there, there seems to be something there. Suddenly, Xiao Hei waved her little claw and pointed to the front as she spoke to Zhuan. Following the direction that Xiao Hei pointed, Zhuan raised his head and looked over. In front of them, there was an extremely large crescent-shaped canyon. This canyon was extremely strange, as if it was not naturally formed. Instead, it was as if a huge blade had descended from the sky and chopped the flat land to form it. In the canyon, there were many figures standing neatly. These figures actually gave off an imposing feeling, as if they were looking up at a very high mountain. Are they people? Zhuan muttered softly as he stared at the figures in the canyon. Let's go over and take a look. With that, Zhuan brought Xiao Hei and turned into a ray of flowing light as they rushed towards the crescent-shaped canyon in the distance. Soon, they stopped at the edge of the canyon and looked down at the figures in the canyon. Are they all the corpses of experts? Their auras are so powerful. There were more than 30 figures in the center of the canyon. They were all dressed in long robes and looked up at the sky as if they were welcoming something. If I'm not wrong, these 30 or so people are basically Emperor Realm experts. The weakest is about the same as Emperor Qing, and the strongest is even close to a saint. Chapter 804. Origin of the Azure Dragon. All of them are Emperor Realm experts? Zhuowen's heart trembled. There were more than 30 experts in the canyon. In other words, there were more than 30 Emperor Realm experts in front of him. Moreover, among these 30 experts, the weakest was comparable to Emperor Qing, and the strongest was close to a saint. How could Zhuowen not be shocked? In the Qing Xian Empire, Emperor Qing was the only Emperor Realm expert. It could be seen how difficult it was to advance to the Emperor Realm. However, there were more than 30 such experts in front of him now. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that these 30 Emperor Realm experts had calm expressions on their faces. They raised their heads slightly, as if they were facing death calmly. Who killed more than 30 Emperor Realm cultivators at the same time? Looking at the corpses of more than 30 experts in the canyon, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with doubt. Emperor-level experts were not so easy to kill. Moreover, there were more than 30 Emperor-level experts here. Even a saint might not be able to kill them instantly. This space experienced a fierce battle back then. Even Emperor-level experts fell. I wonder if the master of the Azure Dragon Hall is still alive? Xiao He carefully observed the corpses of more than 30 experts in the canyon and said indifferently, "In this Azure Dragon Palace, other than this canyon, is there no other place of value?" However, Zhuowen frowned slightly. All along the way, all he saw were ruins and potholes. Besides this gorge, he didn't discover anything else. Could it be that this Azure Dragon Hall is empty? After searching around, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a hint of disappointment. He originally thought that there would be some good things in the Azure Dragon Hall. However, other than the corpses of more than 30 Emperor-level experts in the Crescent Canyon, there was nothing else. After returning to the canyon, Zhuowen discovered that Xiao He was still focused on studying the corpses of the experts in the canyon. He asked, "Xiao He, did you find anything?" Shaking her head, Xiao He sighed softly, "I didn't discover much, but I did some research just now. Before these martial emperors died, they all welcomed death without any signs of resistance." Die generously? Are you saying that these emperor-level powerhouses committed suicide? Zhuowen's pupils constricted. Xiao He shook her head and said, "It's not suicide. It should be because they encountered an enemy that was much stronger than them, and they believed that they would die without a doubt, so they simply stopped resisting and went to their deaths." Oh, an enemy that was much stronger than them? Could it be that the saints are dealing with them? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. It should be a saint. Furthermore, I suspect that it is very likely that the master of the Azure Dragon Palace killed these emperor-level experts. Xiao He analyzed in an orderly manner. Nodding his head, Zhuowen agreed with Xiao He's words. The master of the Azure Dragon Palace was a powerful saint, and these emperor-level experts looked like invaders. It made sense for the master of the Azure Dragon Palace to kill these emperor-level experts. Then what about the master of the Azure Dragon Palace? Staring at the experts in the canyon, Zhuowen was extremely interested in the master of the Azure Dragon Palace. He did not believe that the master of the Azure Dragon Palace would not leave anything behind in such a large space. Before these emperor-level experts died, they all raised their heads and looked in one direction. Could it be that there's something special about the direction they're looking in? Xiao He's sudden voice caused Zhuowen's eyes to light up. It was indeed as Xiao He had said. These emperor-level experts were all looking in one direction, and more than 30 of them were looking in the same direction. Let's go. Let's enter the canyon and look in the direction of these experts. Perhaps we'll be able to find something different. With that, Zhuowen leaped into the canyon and stood beside one of the experts. He imitated the latter and looked up at the sky. Xiao He stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and also looked up at the sky. That's a star. Very quickly, Zhuowen noticed that at the end of the direction they were looking, a brilliant white star appeared in their eyes. This white star was extremely inconspicuous because in front of it was a countless meteor shower. The white star was easily covered by the countless meteor shower. In the direction of the canyon, and with these experts looking up, They could barely see the existence of the white star. Xiao Hei, could that white star be an important place in this space? Zhuan suddenly asked. Xiao Hei lowered her head and muttered to herself for a moment before saying, there should be a reason why so many emperor-level experts are looking up at that white star at the same time. That white star must be extraordinary. Let's go up and take a look. Hearing this, Zhuan followed Xiao Hei's instructions and 3 pairs of lightning wings grew out of his back. He turned into a terrifying bolt of lightning and suddenly shot upwards at an extremely high speed. The white star was extremely far away from the ground. Zhuan had been flying for a full 2 hours, but he actually discovered that the distance between him and the white star had not changed at all. Zhuan's eyes narrowed slightly. He stomped his foot and his speed increased by a large margin. His entire body turned into a swift bolt of lightning as he cut through the void. 4 hours later, Zhuan arrived at the meteor belt in the sky. This meteor belt was formed by countless meteors that had fallen from the sky. As they cut through the void, due to the friction, they produced an extremely dazzling light. It could be said that the meteor belt was filled with burning meteors. Furthermore, the temperature was extremely terrifying. If Zhuan were to be hit directly, he would not be able to withstand it. Be careful, this meteor belt is not a friendly place. Xiao Hei cautioned cautiously. Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. He stomped his foot lightly and his speed decreased significantly. At the same time, he used his perception to constantly observe the movements of the surrounding meteors. In this meteor belt, Zhuan did not dare to explode with his full speed. After all, there were simply too many meteors. If he were to go too fast, it would be difficult to control when the time came. It would be very easy for him to be hit. At that time, he would really be unlucky. As he slowly advanced, Zhuan constantly paid attention to the movements in his surroundings. For a moment, he was scared but not in danger. Although the surrounding meteors were very dense, Zhuan was extremely cautious and managed to avoid them one by one. Be careful. There is a meteor on your left that is rushing towards you at high speed. Suddenly, Xiao Hei's solemn voice rang out, startling Zhuan. He turned his head to look. Indeed, on his left, there was a meteor that was dozens of feet in size. It carried a blazing heat and was rushing towards him at an extremely fast speed. Damn it! Hurry up and get out of here. Zhuan's expression changed drastically. He stomped his foot in an attempt to dodge the meteor that was rushing towards him at high speed. Unfortunately, his speed was still slower than the meteor by a beat. Bang! The huge meteor directly hit Zhuan's leg, causing him to lose his balance and fall downwards. Steady yourself. There are more meteors below. If you don't steady yourself, your situation will become extremely bad. Xiao Hei shouted sternly. At this moment, Zhuan was also very calm. Golden light flashed as he transformed into 4 heads and 8 arms. The smaller meteors that were rushing towards him were all shattered by his hands. After falling for nearly 100 meters, Zhuan finally stabilized himself. His breathing was slightly hurried. This meteor belt was indeed not a good place. The huge meteor just now was too terrifying. Even if Zhuan used the nirvana of the great sun, he would not dare to face it head-on. Be careful this time, Xiao Hei reminded him. Nodding his head, Zhuan stomped his foot and once again rushed towards the depths of the meteor belt. His speed was much slower than before, and he was even more cautious than before. 4 hours later, Zhuan suddenly jumped out of the meteor belt and arrived in the sky opposite the meteor belt. I'm finally out. The white star is not far away from us. Zhuan heaved a sigh of relief. His gaze converged on the white star in the sky. At this moment, the white star was much larger than before. Zhuan knew that he was not far away from the white star. Let's go. Let's see the true appearance of the white star. Xiao Hei's face was also filled with curiosity as she hurriedly said. With that, Zhuan once again transformed into a bolt of lightning and rushed towards the white star that was getting closer and closer. His speed was much faster than before. An hour later, a bolt of lightning streaked across the void and stopped 1,000 meters away from the white star, revealing a tall and straight figure. Looking at the white star that was 1,000 meters away, One could not help but be stunned. His mouth was slightly agape. The scene in front of him was really shocking. The true appearance of the white star was a pale white dragon that was tens of thousands of feet long. The pale white dragon was strangely pale from head to toe. The pale dragon's huge body was curled up as if it was protecting something. Through the pale dragon's body, Jun saw that at the center of the huge dragon was an equally huge hall. Above the hall were 3 bold and powerful words, Azure Dragon Hall. The hall that was protected by the huge dragon in front of him was the real Azure Dragon Hall. So this is the real Azure Dragon Hall. This pale dragon should be formed from the origin of the Azure Dragon. It should be the work of the master of the Azure Dragon Hall. Xiao He said with a cautious gaze. The origin of the Azure Dragon? Jun asked doubtfully. Xiao He glanced at Jun and explained, the owner of this true dragon's corpse is the Azure Dragon, I've already told you. Although the Azure Dragon has been dead for a long time, there will still be a trace of its origin in its corpse. The master of the Azure Dragon Hall is very lucky. When he found the Azure Dragon's corpse, it shouldn't have been dead for long. That's why he was able to extract a strand of origin energy from its corpse. The huge Azure Dragon around the Azure Dragon Hall is formed from the Azure Dragon's origin. It doesn't have any intelligence or consciousness, but it contains an extremely dense amount of origin energy. If you can enter the Azure Dragon Hall, I'm afraid you can use the Azure Dragon's origin to quickly raise your cultivation. At this point, Xiao He's eyes revealed a trace of emotion. It was obvious that he admired the methods of the Azure Dragon Hall. So it's not a true dragon, but a strand of the Azure Dragon's origin. Chapter 805. Tsang Long Taoist, I wonder what kind of treasures exist in the Tsang Long Hall? Zhuowen's gaze shifted slightly as he looked at the Tsang Long Hall above the Tsang Long Hall. His eyes were burning with passion. Xiao He nodded and muttered, the Tsang Long Hall is a saint's cave after all. The things inside are definitely not bad. It depends on whether you have the ability to obtain them. Let's go up and take a look. As he spoke, Xiao He took the lead and flew towards the Tsang Long Hall. Jun followed behind him, not to be outdone, and instantly ascended to the top of the Tsang Long Hall. In front of the hall was an extremely huge square. In front of the square, there was a huge hollow door. The ground was shrouded in a misty white mist, as if an immortal had descended to this place. Stepping on the clouds under his feet, Jun entered the square door and arrived at the square. At the end of the square, there was a hall that was as vast as a giant beast. It stood there quietly, unchanging since ancient times. In front of the hall, there was a stone tablet that was dozens of feet tall. On the surface of the stone tablet, the words Tsang Long Hall were engraved. Zhuan knew that the vast hall in front of him was the real Tsang Long Hall. Rumble! Suddenly, the countless clouds and mist that lingered on the ground of the square suddenly started to roll. A strange force rushed out from the entire square, causing Zhuan to involuntarily take a few steps back. His eyes were filled with bewilderment. What's going on? The clouds and mist in this square. Before he could finish speaking, countless clouds and mist rolled and gathered in the sky above the square to form a stalwart figure. The figure formed by the clouds and mist was the image of a middle-aged man. He wore a loose robe and had a feathered crown on his head. His eyes were bright like the moon and bright like the stars. Countless dragon shadows swept out and circled around this imposing figure. It was an extremely magnificent and terrifying sight. I am the Tsang Long Taoist. The Tsang Long Hall was built by me, and you are the first person to enter the Tsang Long Hall in tens of thousands of years. The stalwart man slowly bent down. His eyes flickered with a bright light, as if they contained the evolution of countless centuries and were filled with vicissitudes. Tsang Long Taoist? The master of the Tsang Long Hall? Hearing this, Zhuowen's pupils constricted as he stared fixedly at the stalwart man. He could feel the terror of the Tsang Long Taoist in front of him. Are you still alive? What happened in the space of the Tsang Long Hall? Zhuowen suddenly asked anxiously. However, Taoist Tsang Long Taoist, Taoist, only Taoist glanced indifferently at Zhuowen before he raised his head once again, as if he was recalling something. Brat! This should be the phantom left behind by Taoist master Tsang Long back then. It's impossible for him to know what you're talking about. Don't waste your time. Blackie stood on Zhuo Wen's shoulder and said indifferently, Taoist, 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 long Taoist, 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 long Taoist. Xiao He sneered and said, You have never experienced how terrifying the catastrophe was back then. Let me tell you, the ancient era was the most prosperous era of martial arts in the heavenly armor continent. At that time, emperor-level and saint-level experts were extremely common, unlike now where even saint-level experts are pitifully rare. In that era, there was even a sage grand ceremony. Tens of thousands of saint-level experts invited a Tao discussion conference. That was a glorious era where geniuses came forth in large numbers and experts were as common as clouds. Speaking of this, Xiao He's face revealed a trace of emotion. Clearly, he had also recalled some past events from the ancient era. Sage grand ceremony? The more Zhuowen listened, the more surprised he became. Tens of thousands of saint-level experts had participated in the grand ceremony. Countless saint-level experts had discussed and comprehended the Tao. Thinking of such a scene, Zhuowen could not help but feel a little shocked and excited. In Zhuowen's current era, it was hard to even see a saint-level expert. As expected, it could not be compared to the ancient era at all. These things are still too far away for you, and you won't be able to come into contact with such things. Now, let's see what Taoist master Tsang Long has to say. Xiao He shook his head and did not continue speaking. Instead, he signaled Zhuowen to pay attention to Taoist master Tsang Long's movements. The Azure Dragon Hall contains a universe within, forming a world of its own. Many wonders are in the hall. There are a total of 3 worlds in the hall. If you pass through each world, you will receive a corresponding reward. Moreover, each of these 3 worlds is more dangerous than the last. If you are not careful, your life will be in danger. If you are a coward who is afraid of death, then there is no need to enter the Azure Dragon Hall. As he spoke, Taoist master Tsang Long looked down at Zhuowen and asked indifferently, Are you willing to pass through the Azure Dragon Hall? You have to think carefully. Taoist master Tsang Long is a saint-level expert. The Azure Dragon Hall that he set up is also filled with danger. It's best to think carefully before making a decision. Xiao He's gaze also converged on Zhuowen. He was also waiting for Zhuowen's answer. Zhuowen laughed and said in a clear voice, Charge. Why not? There is no free lunch in this world. Since I want to obtain benefits, then I have to bet my life. If I don't even dare to bet my life, then how can I become a powerhouse? As he spoke, Zhuowen suddenly stomped his foot and directly stepped through the door of the Azure Dragon Hall in front of him. Buzz! The moment Zhuowen stepped into the Azure Dragon Hall, an invisible wave was produced and instantly enveloped Zhuowen's entire body. Then, Zhuowen discovered that his vision went black. When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, he discovered that he was standing on the peak of a towering mountain. A wild wind swept over, blowing Zhuowen's disheveled hair. On the peak of the mountain, Zhuowen looked down and discovered that there was a vast and boundless land below. On the land, there were countless living beings. At the same time, cities were like countless black dots that covered every corner of the land. Suddenly, a golden light flashed. On a huge rock beside Zhuowen, lines of golden words appeared. This is a layer of heaven and earth. This heaven and earth is ruled by Shenzhen. There are countless demons hidden in this abyss of heaven and earth. These demons are very strong and have an undying body. Killing them is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The only way is to comprehend the power of heaven and earth within 3 years. Only the power of heaven and earth is the nemesis of demons. 3 years later, demons will descend upon this world and all living beings will be wiped out. You are no exception. Head to Shenzhen and enter the Shenzhen Wall of Enlightenment. Comprehend the Tao for 3 years. If you comprehend the power of heaven and earth, you will live. If you don't comprehend it, you will die. Looking at the golden words on the wall, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. According to the words of the Tsang Long Taoist, wouldn't he have to stay in this world for 3 years? That was too long. Now, Luan was most worried about his family and friends in the outside world. Not only Lu Hantian, but also the Zhua family. After all, his identity as a Ryuka descendant had been exposed. It would not be difficult to find out about the Zhua family behind him. 3 years is too long. Can it be faster? Zhuon suddenly shouted to the sky. The flow of time in the Tsang Long Hall is 365 times faster than the outside world. A day in the outside world is a year in the Tsang Long Hall. A vigorous voice sounded in his mind at a steady pace. A year here is only a day in the outside world. This Tsang Long Taoist is so powerful that he can actually change the laws of time of heaven and earth? Xiao Hei's eyes flickered, revealing a look of shock. Zhuon, on the other hand, heaved a sigh of relief. If what the Tsang Long Taoist said was true, then he had a lot of time. After all, a year in this world was only a day in the outside world. Xiao Hei, what is the power of heaven and earth? Zhuon suddenly asked with a frown. Zhuon was indeed not familiar with the power of heaven and earth that the Tsang Long Taoist had mentioned. He could only consult Xiao Hei. Above the concept is the power of heaven and earth. The power of heaven and earth is a mysterious power that is even stronger than the power of concept. The essence of the power of concept is actually to use the mysterious power to magnify one's potential by thousands of times, causing one's strength to increase to an extremely exaggerated level in a short period of time. However, the power of heaven and earth is different. The concept is to stimulate one's potential, but the power of heaven and earth is to stimulate the power of heaven and earth. Relying on the mysterious power, the power of heaven and earth is added to one's body for one's own use. When Xiao Hei said until here, he saw that Zhuon was still somewhat puzzled. He shook his head and said, "There is a limit to a person's strength. The power of concept that you can use is limited. However, the power of heaven and earth is released by heaven and earth. The stronger heaven and earth is, the stronger the power that you can borrow will be." Hearing this, a look of understanding appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. In layman's terms, the power of concept was actually to use one's body as a container to allow this container to carry more power. Then, one had to continuously increase the capacity of the container. However, there was ultimately a limit to this. On the other hand, the power of heaven and earth was to use heaven and earth as a container. If one wanted to become stronger, one only needed to borrow the power of heaven and earth. There was an essential difference between the two. Comprehending the power of heaven and earth is much more difficult than comprehending the concept. Although your talent is indeed strong, it is not very likely that you can comprehend such a mysterious power in a short 3 years. Xiao Hei shook his head and said in a rather pessimistic tone. Shrugging his shoulders, Zhuon said, "Didn't Taoist Tsang Long just mention that there is an enlightenment rock wall in Shenzhen, the ruler of this heaven and earth? Perhaps that enlightenment rock wall will be of great benefit to my comprehension?" Taoist Tsang Long emphasized the enlightenment rock wall in Shenzhen. "I'm afraid that thing will be of great help to your comprehension. Now, let's go to Shenzhen first." Xiao Hei nodded in agreement. Then he stood on Zhuowen's shoulder. Following the ladder, he turned into a gust of wind and swept towards the huge land below the mountain peak. At the center of this heaven and earth, there was an extremely huge mountain range. This mountain range stretched for tens of thousands of miles. At a glance, it looked like a huge crouching dragon. Above this mountain range, thick clouds and mist lingered all year round, covering the landscape of the mountain range. This mountain range was called the Holy Vein by the creatures of this heaven and earth. Above the Holy Vein, there was a huge sect called Shenzhen. It was the true ruler of this heaven and earth, and was revered and worshipped by countless people. A figure suddenly swept over and entered the clouds and mist above the Holy Vein. After 2 hours, the figure reappeared with a frown on his face. "There are quite powerful restrictions around this Holy Vein. We can't find the specific location of Shenzhen at all." Chapter 806. Na Lan Hongyu, Shenzhen is not simple. If you barge in like this, it is unlikely that you will be able to barge in. There are quite a few people gathered at the foot of the mountain. Perhaps there is a grand event in Shenzhen. When the time comes, you just have to sneak in. Xiao Hei's eyes darted around and immediately noticed that there were quite a few people gathered at the foot of Shenzhen. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded his head. With a stomp of his foot, he landed in an extremely remote corner. Then, he walked out of the corner and immediately discovered that there was a sea of people at the foot of Shenzhen. It was quite a spectacular sight. The foot of Shenzhen is so lively. Looking at the sea of people at the foot of the mountain, Yuan could not help but reveal a look of astonishment. It seemed that it was just as Xiao Hei had said. There was indeed a grand event in Shenzhen today. Moreover, Yuan also discovered that the crowd at the foot of the mountain were basically elders bringing along some young boys and girls. Those young boys and girls all had looks of anticipation in their eyes. Zhuowen silently stood in the crowd. Relying on his sharp senses, he could hear all the discussions around him. And he finally knew why Shenzhen was so lively today. It turned out that today was Shenzhen's triennial mountain opening ceremony. And this so-called mountain opening ceremony was to open Shenzhen's mountain gate and begin to recruit geniuses from the countless surrounding cities, thus replenishing Shenzhen with new blood. For this reason, the elders of countless surrounding cities all brought their own juniors and rushed to Shenzhen's mountain gate from thousands of miles away in order to participate in this mountain opening ceremony. They hoped that their juniors would be chosen by Shenzhen and become a member of Shenzhen. So it's to recruit disciples. Hearing the discussions around him, Zhuowen's eyes flashed and he muttered to himself in a low voice, "Anyway, my goal is to enter Shenzhen. I might as well participate in this mountain opening ceremony." The restrictions around Shenzhen were very strong. Even Xiao Hei could not break through them. Therefore, if he wanted to enter Shenzhen, he still had to rely on the internal members of Shenzhen to lead him. Once he entered Shenzhen with Zhuowen's strength, where could he not go? It would not be difficult to find the Enlightenment Cliff. Thinking of this, Zhuowen calmly stood in the crowd, appearing extremely inconspicuous as he silently waited for the opening ceremony to begin. Moreover, Yuan discovered that the cultivators gathered at the foot of the mountain were generally not very strong. The strongest among them was around the level of a 5-wheel ultimate emperor. There was no one who had surpassed the level of a 4-wheel ultimate emperor. It was very obvious that the cultivators in this layer of heaven were generally weak. However, Zhuan knew that there were definitely 4-wheel ultimate emperors in Shenzhen. After all, this was the ruler of this world. It was impossible for such an expert to not exist. Thump, thump, thump. Suddenly, the crisp sound of horse hooves rang out from the end of the road on the other side of the mountain gate. It caused the entire area to shake. The sound of horse hooves immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. They all looked towards the end of the road. At the end of the road, a group of armored cavalry was rapidly approaching. There were more than a dozen people in this cavalry group. Standing at the very front of the group was a valiant and heroic figure. She was leading the way. This figure was a young woman in her prime. She was dressed in red armor with 5 red flags on the back of her armor. She sat on a tall horse and the flags fluttered in the wind. She looked quite carefree. Are they from Saint Light City? The woman in the lead is the daughter of the Saint Light City Lord, Nalin Hongyu. Saint Light City is the most powerful faction among the countless cities. The Saint Light City Lord, Nalin Shang, is known as the #1 city lord. It's best if we don't provoke them. Nalin Hongyu is quite petty. It's best if we don't provoke her. It won't be a good thing if she remembers us. Many people's expressions changed slightly when they saw the large group of cavalry rushing over. They discussed animatedly and opened up a path for them. Hearing the discussions of the surrounding people, Zhuan also knew that the group of cavalry rushing over had a powerful background. Otherwise, it would be impossible for everyone to be so wary of them. What's so great about Saint Light City? If Nalin Shang hadn't encountered a fortuitous encounter back then, how could he have become the #1 city lord? If I can obtain Nalin Shang's fortuitous encounter, my achievements will only be better and stronger than his. A somewhat sour voice sounded from beside Zhuowen. On Zhuowen's left, a middle-aged man with a face as black as charcoal raised his head slightly. There was a trace of disdain in his eyes. He was actually extremely disdainful of Saint Light City. Master, you're right. The Saint Light City Lord really can't compare to you. Your talent completely surpasses Nailan Shang's. All you lack is a fortuitous encounter. A young man and a young woman followed beside the middle-aged man. They should be his disciples. At this moment, the young man and woman hurriedly flattered the black-faced man. The middle-aged man enjoyed the flattery of his disciples. He raised his chin and chuckled, "Of course. If I also have a fortuitous encounter, my achievements will definitely surpass Nailan Shang's." Zhuan inwardly shook his head when he heard this. This middle-aged man thought too highly of himself. He was already so old, but he was only a third-wheel ultimate emperor. Even if he had a fortuitous encounter, his achievements wouldn't be much better. Zhuan naturally wouldn't say such words. He only watched indifferently as the middle-aged man blew his own trumpet. "Oh, do you mean that if you also have a fortuitous encounter, you can replace my father's position as the #1 city lord?" Suddenly, an indifferent voice was slowly transmitted over from a short distance away. Nailan Hongyu's group had unknowingly arrived at a spot not far from the black-faced man, and the black-faced man's words were naturally heard by Nailan Hongyu. The black-faced man's expression froze when he heard this. He turned his head and happened to see Nailan Hongyu coldly staring at him. His entire body involuntarily trembled. "So it's Miss Nailan. I was just spouting nonsense. Don't take it seriously," the black-faced man hurriedly explained. When Nailan Hongyu appeared, the young man and young woman standing beside the black-faced man kept their heads lowered, not daring to look at her face. "Unfortunately, I already took it seriously." Nailan Hongyu's beautiful face was filled with coldness and ruthlessness. She said to the soldiers behind her, "These 3 people insulted our Saint Light City. They deserve to die." "Yes." More than 10 heavily armored soldiers responded in unison. Then, they dismounted from their horses and charged at the black-faced man with long spears in their hands. The black-faced man hadn't expected Nailan Hongyu to be so unruly and unscrupulous. He immediately roared angrily and charged forward, wanting to escape the encirclement. Puchi! A long spear swept past and instantly pierced through the black-faced man's chest. His strength wasn't bad as he was a third-wheel ultimate emperor. Unfortunately, the soldiers behind Nailan Hongyu weren't weak either. They were also third-wheel ultimate emperors. Moreover, there were more than 10 of them working together. The black-faced man was no match for them at all. The 2 disciples beside the black-faced man couldn't escape the fate of being killed either. In just an instant, 3 corpses appeared on the field. Many people in the surroundings gasped when they saw the 3 people killed in an instant. Their eyes were filled with fear and dread as they looked at Nailan Hongyu. They had long heard that Nailan Hongyu was crafty and unreasonable. Now, it seemed that the rumors weren't false. She had directly taken the lives of the black-faced man just because of a few words. She was indeed too domineering. Zhuan frowned slightly. He was also rather displeased with Nailan Hongyu's actions. However, the black-faced man could only blame himself for being too talkative. He clearly knew that Nailan Hongyu couldn't be provoked, but he still insisted on using the Saint Light City's city lord as an example. If he wasn't courting death, then what was? "And the 6 of you. Just now, this person was slandering our Saint Light City, but the 6 of you didn't say anything to stop him. You can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape punishment. Cripple the 6 of them." After killing the black-faced man and the other 2, Nailan Hongyu didn't seem to have vented her anger. Her cold eyes immediately stared at the 6 people standing beside the black-faced man. Surprisingly, Yuan was among these 6 people. After all, Yuan was standing beside the black-faced man. At this moment, Nailan Hongyu had treated him as a target to take care of. Hearing these words, Zhuan's eyes narrowed slightly. Nailan Hongyu had gone too far. It was fine that she had killed the black-faced man, but the 6 of them had nothing to do with the black-faced man at all. Could it be that just because the black-faced man had slandered Saint Light City and they didn't say anything to refute him, she wanted to cripple their cultivation? This method of harming innocent bystanders was too overbearing. "Miss Nailan, this has nothing to do with us. The black-faced man was the one who slandered Saint Light City. It has nothing to do with us at all." Among the 6 people who had been found out, one of them was rather fat. At this moment, he was somewhat unconvinced as he stood up and spoke. A shadow suddenly flashed out. The fat man hadn't even finished speaking when the shadow had already heavily smashed into his chest. Soon after, it pierced through. It was actually a long spear that glowed with cold light. The fat man's face was filled with disbelief. He hadn't even finished speaking when he had actually suffered a fatal disaster. This was something he had never expected. "Did I allow you to speak?" Nailin Hongyu coldly glanced at the fat man, then her gaze landed on the other 5 people. She said indifferently, "I think all of you should be more aware. Cripple your own cultivation so that my people don't have to do anything." As soon as these words were spoken, besides Yun, the expressions of the other 4 people became extremely unsightly. Nailin Hongyu actually wanted them to cripple their own cultivation. This was a huge humiliation. "I'll count to 3. If you still don't cripple your own cultivation, then your fate will be the same as that person from before." As she spoke, Nailin Hongyu pointed at the already dead fat man. 1, 2, 3. When Nailin Hongyu counted to 3, 4 of them shouted loudly as their hands suddenly smashed onto their lower abdomens. Instantly, their dantians were shattered, and they became complete cripples from then on. The 4 of them let out a shrill cry as they held onto their abdomens and fell to the ground. They screamed hysterically and rolled about. Their appearance was extremely miserable. Nailin Hongyu nodded with satisfaction, and then her gaze finally descended onto the last young man. Her shapely brows raised as she said, "Why haven't you crippled your own cultivation? Could it be that you want to die?" As soon as these words were spoken, the gazes of the surrounding people converged onto the young man. Their hearts were filled with curiosity, curious about the young man's current actions. "Do you think you have the qualifications?" Chapter 807. Mountain Opening Ceremony. Nailin Hongyu's beautiful eyes narrowed and her gaze became even more gloomy. The young man in front of her was really reckless. He actually dared to speak to her in such a manner. "Do you dare to repeat what you just said?" Nailin Hongyu said coldly. At this moment, the surrounding crowd's gazes were gathered on Jun. They really wanted to know how the young man would respond to Nailin Hongyu's question. "Utterly boring." Yun shook his head and ignored Nailin Hongyu. In his opinion, this was just a small quarrel and he naturally would not take it to heart. "How dare you ignore me? Fine, today I will let you know the consequences of offending me. Go, cripple this person's limbs. I want him to kneel and beg for mercy." Zhuowen's disregard made Nailin Hongyu extremely angry. She pointed her jade-like finger at the soldier beside her and coldly said, "Yes." The soldier nodded. He grasped the long spear in his hand and took a step forward. His entire body was like a swimming dragon as he charged directly towards Yun. His speed soared to the extreme. "Brat, you can only blame yourself for being blind and offending Miss Nailin. You better reflect on yourself when you go to hell." In an instant, the soldier arrived in front of Yun. He moved his spear and stabbed toward Zhuowen's chest. However, Yun was dumbfounded as he stood there without moving. This brat is courting death. He is actually not dodging? I'm afraid he is really scared silly. Since he doesn't have any strength, he shouldn't cause trouble. After all, trouble comes from the mouth. Many people secretly shook their heads and sighed when they saw Zhuowen's stunned appearance. They all believed that the young man in front of them was undoubtedly going to die. The smile on Nailin Hongyu's lips grew wider and her beautiful eyes were filled with arrogance. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and coldly stared at the stunned young man. "You are just a piece of trash with a glib tongue. Serves you right if you die." Ding! The sound of metal clashing resounded, following which the soldier's right hand pressed against the end of the long spear. His entire body was like a statue and he was actually unable to move an inch forward. Many people immediately saw the soldier's strange behavior and it caused the confusion in their eyes to become even more intense. They were secretly guessing what the soldier was doing. "What are you doing? Just kill him." Nailin Hongyu also saw the soldier's strange behavior and coldly snorted. Her beautiful face was full of displeasure. On the other hand, the soldier couldn't say anything. When the spear pierced Zhuowen's chest, he thought he had succeeded, but the next scene left him dumbfounded. This was because when his spear was pressed against Zhuowen's chest, it was as if it was pressed against a hard rock. It was unable to move even an inch. In other words, this young man's body was much harder than his spear. Even if I stand here and let him kill me, he won't be able to. What's the point of keeping such a piece of trash? Zhuon finally opened his mouth. With a stomp of his foot, a terrifying strength chi burst out, causing the spear in his chest to crumble inch by inch, turning into countless fragments. Then he clenched his right hand into a fist and fiercely punched the soldier's chest. Puchi! A mouthful of blood spurted out, and like a butterfly with its wings broken, the soldier flew backwards and crashed heavily onto the ground more than 10 meters away. After struggling for a while, he became completely motionless. What? He killed an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator with a single punch? How can this kid be so terrifying? Everyone's gazes converged on the motionless soldier nearby. Everyone knew that this soldier was probably already dead. However, this was an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator after all. Killing him with a single punch was a little too terrifying, wasn't it? The smile on Nalan Hongyu's face froze. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at Zhuon as she said coldly, "You dare kill someone from my Light Saint City? He wants to kill me. Do you think I can't kill him?" Zhuon sneered. Nalan Hongyu's face was gloomy as she said coldly, "Attack together. I want this kid to stay here forever." As soon as these words came out, more than a dozen armored soldiers around Nalan Hongyu turned into afterimages and rushed toward Zhuon, who was in the center. "Good timing," Zhuon sneered. With a stomp of his foot, 3 pairs of lightning wings sprouted from his back. His entire body turned into an ethereal bolt of lightning. Everyone saw a bolt of lightning flash across the bodies of the 10 or so soldiers. Following which, the bodies of the 10 or so soldiers suddenly froze and were sent flying back, smashing into the ground tens of meters away. They struggled in pain and screamed incessantly. A bolt of lightning flashed past and appeared in the center of the clearing, revealing a tall and straight figure. "You'd better not provoke me again. Otherwise, you'll pay a much higher price next time." He glanced coldly at Nalan Hongyu, causing her to involuntarily take a few steps back. Zhuon found a rather remote corner and silently waited for Shengzhen's mountain opening ceremony to begin. Right now, his goal was Shengzhen's Wall of Enlightenment, so he didn't want to cause trouble so soon. This. Everyone couldn't help but gasp when they saw the dozen or so soldiers that had been instantly sent flying. More than a dozen Ultimate Emperor Realm 3-wheeled soldiers had actually been defeated by this mysterious youth in a single exchange. Wasn't the speed too fast? Who exactly is this kid? Why have I never heard of him before? I've never heard of him either, but this kid is very strong. He'll definitely be able to enter Shenzhen during this mountain opening ceremony. That's right. This kid's cultivation is at least at the Ultimate Emperor Realm. Entering Shenzhen won't be a problem at all. The sounds of discussion were accompanied by an uproar. Everyone's eyes involuntarily glanced towards the corner where Zhuon was, discussing the latter's background and identity. Zhuon didn't care about the discussions around him. No matter how they guessed, Zhuon couldn't possibly be a cultivator of this world. Nalan Hongyu's beautiful eyes flickered. She didn't provoke Zhuon again. The strength that Zhuon had just displayed made her realize that this kid was much stronger than her and couldn't be easily provoked. However, Nalan Hongyu's beautiful eyes were filled with resentment. Zhuon's actions had undoubtedly caused her to lose face in front of everyone. Late in the morning, the majestic gates of Shenzhen finally opened slowly under the expectant gazes of the crowd. A group of people swept out from within. In front of this group of people, there were 2 figures with particularly powerful auras. One of them was dressed in long black robes and had a cold expression. The other was an old man with a black mole between his eyebrows. Behind the 2 of them were 20 youths who weren't very old. These youths were surprisingly dressed the same way. They should be disciples of Shenzhen. Zhuon raised his eyebrows when he saw the black-robed man and the old man with the black mole. These two people weren't weak. He could sense that the black-robed man was at the ultimate emperor realm, while the old man was slightly weaker. He was at the ultimate emperor realm. This kind of cultivation was indeed enough to completely suppress the crowd at the foot of the mountain. This was because the strongest person in the crowd was only at the ultimate emperor realm. Today is the grand opening ceremony of Shenzhen. I would like to thank everyone for coming. The old man with the black mole said with a smile. Elder Bai, stop talking nonsense. Take out the testing stone tablets and test them. The black-robed man said coldly. The old man with the black mole called Elder Bai nodded and waved his sleeve. Instantly, 20 huge stone tablets descended from the sky. If one looked closely, the surface of these huge stone tablets was embedded with 10 precious pearls from bottom to top. They looked rather magnificent. These are the testing stone tablets. Everyone can see that there are 10 precious pearls embedded on the surface of the testing stone tablets. The testing stone tablet is testing the comprehensive result of your aptitude and strength. The more pearls you can light up, the better your result will be. After he finished speaking, the black-robed man said to the 20 disciples of Shenzhen behind him, the 20 of you will each be responsible for one stone tablet. There will be no mistakes. Yes. The 20 disciples of Shenzhen replied in unison. Then, they turned into 20 streaks of flowing light and arrived in front of their respective stone tablets. They were prepared to preside over the testing stone tablets. Second uncle, do you still remember me? As soon as the black-robed man finished speaking, a rather crisp voice rang out and attracted the attention of the black-robed man and the surrounding people. A beautiful figure suddenly arrived in front of the mountain gate and stood beside the black-robed man with a charming smile on her face. Tongyu? Haha, I didn't expect that you would also come to participate in the opening ceremony. The black-robed man was stunned at first. Then, his gaze converged on Nalin Hongyu, who was standing in front of him. A rare smile appeared on his cold face. It was my father who asked me to come. I had no choice. He also said that I would have to rely on you to take care of me in Shenzhen this time. As she spoke, Nalin Hongyu hugged the black-robed man's arm in an extremely intimate manner. The black-robed man didn't avoid it and said indifferently, Big brother is still so shrewd. I'm afraid he knows that I will be in this opening ceremony, so he asked you to come, right? Nalin Hongyu stuck out her tongue and said, Second uncle, nothing can escape your eyes. Alright, since you have personally come to Shenzhen, I can't be a bad host, right? You don't have to take the test for the opening ceremony. When the time comes, I will directly ask for a position as an inner court disciple for you, the black-robed man said dotingly. As he spoke, the black-robed man's gaze landed on Elder Bai, who was standing nearby, and he said, Elder Bai, this girl is my niece. I want to promote her to an inner court disciple. You won't have any objections, right? Elder Bai frowned slightly. Nalin Hongyu wasn't young, and her cultivation was only at the ultimate emperor realm. Logically speaking, she didn't have the qualifications to become an inner court disciple. However, the black-robed man's status was higher than his, so he couldn't refuse. He could only tactfully say, We can't decide on this matter. When the time comes, we will need to seek the approval of the Holy Lord. I know. When the time comes, I will personally go to the Holy Lord. The black-robed man nodded. This scene was naturally witnessed by everyone below the mountain gate. Many people's eyes flickered with displeasure. The black-robed man was opening the back door for Nalin Hongyu in public. Wasn't he a little too arrogant and despotic? Chapter 808. Test and Contradiction. Let the test begin. Only those who can light up 6 pearls or more will pass and become Shenzhen's outer disciples. If you can light up 10 pearls, you will be promoted to an inner disciple. Elder Bai waved his sleeves. Immediately, the crowd split into 20 teams and went to their respective stone tablets in an orderly manner to take the test. Zhuan was at the end of the line for the 3rd stone tablet. At this moment, the juniors in the line had excited and expectant looks in their eyes. They rubbed shoulders and were eager to give it a try. The youth in the first line could not wait to place his right palm on the stone tablet. However, To his disappointment, only 3 pearls lit up on the stone tablet. Light up 3 pearls failed. Ugh. The Shenzhen disciple beside the stone tablet said coldly with a cold expression. Feeling the gazes from the crowd, the youth was too ashamed to show his face. He left the stone tablet dejectedly. Lighting up an orb, you are not qualified. Ugh. Light up 4 pearls failed. Ugh. The team's test was carried out in an orderly manner. Unfortunately, none of the 20 or so people in front of them passed the test. This cruel result caused many of the juniors in the line to panic. This was because they realized that some of the stronger youths had been mercilessly eliminated. Their chances of passing had become extremely small. Light up 6 pearls passed. Congratulations, stand behind the stone tablet first. The Shenzhen disciple beside the stone tablet said in a much gentler voice. At this moment, 6 pearls lit up on the surface of the stone tablet. It was extremely dazzling in the eyes of the crowd. At this moment, the person who was taking the test was a young girl wearing a green dress. Perhaps she felt the envious gazes from the crowd. The young girl lifted her chin high like a proud peacock and went behind the stone tablet. Time ticked by. Soon, more than half of the team had completed the test. However, only 4 of them had passed. They were 2 men and 2 women. Among them, the highest was the one who managed to light up 7 orbs. The elimination rate of the stone tablet was so high that it was out of Zhuowen's expectations. There were at least 500 to 600 people in their team who had participated in the test. Now, more than half of them had passed, but only 4 people had passed. In front of the mountain gate, the black-robed man and elder stood side by side silently. Their gazes occasionally swept across the young boys and girls who were taking the test under the stone tablet. No one knew what they were thinking. Nailin Hongyu, who was standing beside the black-robed man, had been searching through the ranks with her beautiful eyes. Soon, she locked onto a figure at the end of the 3rd group, and a bitter smile appeared on her face. And the figure that Nailin Hongyu had locked onto was none other than Zhuowen, who was leisurely waiting for the test. Within the group, Yuan naturally felt Nailin Hongyu's bitter gaze. However, he sneered in his heart. Originally, Yuan didn't care about Nailin Hongyu at all. After all, she was only an ultimate emperor stage cultivator. In Zhuowen's eyes, she was no different from an ant. Therefore, he didn't want to bother with her. But now, Nailin Hongyu's gaze made Zhuowen realize that she wouldn't let him off so easily. You'd better not provoke me. Otherwise, you'll regret it in the end. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He no longer paid attention to Nailin Hongyu. Nailin Hongyu was just a small fry. She didn't have the qualifications to be remembered by him. You've lit up 5 orbs. You're not qualified. The cold voice of a Shenzhen disciple rang out once again. The youth in front of Zhuowen had a vexed expression on his face. He was only 1 orb away from passing. Zhuowen took a step forward and arrived in front of the testing stone tablet. He gently placed his right hand on the surface of the tablet. Immediately, he felt a strange energy spread out from the tablet and circulate through his meridians. Zhuowen's appearance attracted the attention of many people. After all, the strength that Zhuowen had displayed in his clash with Nailin Hongyu wasn't weak. Many people believed that this mysterious youth had the strength to enter Shenzhen. Nailin Hongyu's beautiful eyes focused on Zhuowen. Her beautiful eyes flickered and revealed a trace of resentment. CI. Instantly, the orbs on the surface of the tablet where Zhuowen was standing lit up one by one. In an instant, more than 6 orbs had been lit up. Moreover, the number of orbs was still rising rapidly. In an instant, 10 orbs on the surface of the tablet lit up at the same time. It was as if 10 scorching suns were releasing light and heat at the same time. It's actually 10 orbs. This kid has actually activated 10 orbs. The surroundings suddenly became silent. After the silence, there was an uproar. It was like a monstrous tsunami that resounded through the crowd. The lazy expression of the Glory Sect disciple who was in charge of the 3rd stone tablet turned serious instantly. His gaze was fixed on the surface of the stone tablet. The 10 glowing pearls on the surface of the stone tablet froze on the spot. On the mountain gate, the black-robed man and old Bai, who were originally indifferent, also fixed their eyes on the third tablet. As the hosts this time around, they naturally knew very well how difficult it was to trigger the 10 treasured pearls on the testing steel. Thus, they did not have any hope that someone would be able to trigger the 10 treasured pearls. The probability of that happening was simply too low. But now, this scene had really happened in front of them. Nailin Hongyu was also stunned on the spot. The resentment in her beautiful eyes became more intense. She whispered a few words to the black-robed man beside her. The black-robed man frowned and his eyes flickered. My result should be considered as a pass, right? Looking at the stunned Shenzhen disciple beside the tablet, Yun had to remind him. The latter coughed a few times awkwardly and said with a smile, Junior brother's talent is rare. You can actually activate 10 orbs. According to the rules, Junior brother can directly become an inner disciple of Shenzhen. The enthusiastic attitude of the Shenzhen disciple was naturally seen by many people. However, there was no jealousy in their eyes. Instead, they were full of envy. This was because Zhuowen's result was too abnormal. It was out of everyone's reach. It was enough to break everyone's jealousy. Nodding his head, Yun was not surprised at all. With his current strength, if he still couldn't activate the testing stone tablet, then his previous cultivation would have been in vain. Wait! Just as Zhuowen was about to lift his foot and walk behind the stone tablet, an untimely voice sounded, causing Zhuowen's foot to stop in midair. Raising his head slightly, Yun stared at the black-robed man on the mountain gate and said indifferently, What's the matter? It is said that you deliberately caused trouble in front of Shenzhen's mountain gate and injured many people. Is this true? The black-robed man looked down at Zhuowen and said indifferently. Zhuowen's eyes looked past the black-robed man and landed on Nailin Hongyu, whose face was full of resentment. He knew that the black-robed man's sudden call was probably related to Nailin Hongyu. At this moment, many people's eyes were focused on them, especially when they saw the black-robed man questioning Zhuowen. Everyone's eyes were full of interest. Just now, many people present were aware of the conflict between Zhuowen and Nailin Hongyu, and this black-robed man was Nailin Hongyu's second uncle. They were afraid that this young man was going to be unlucky. It was that group of people who provoked me first. Am I not allowed to defend myself? Zhuowen replied indifferently. The black-robed man shook his head and said, Shenzhen is the holy land of martial arts. How can we allow you to act like a madman and cause trouble here? Shenzhen will not accept a disciple with such a bad character like you. Now, get out of here. As soon as these words were spoken, many people around were stunned. The young man in front of them was a genius who had lit up 10 pearls on the testing stone tablet. The black-robed man actually planned to drive such a genius out? Old Bai could not sit still and said to the black-robed man, Brother Nailin, this child has lit up 10 pearls. It is a rare occurrence in 100 years. How can you act on your own initiative and drive him out of Shenzhen? Old Bai, so what if this child is talented? His character is too bad. Our Shenzhen has spent so much effort to cultivate such a genius. I am afraid that we may not be able to get a reward in the future. It is not worth it to raise such an ingrate. The black-robed man shook his head and said that Zhuowen's character was not good. He had made up his mind to drive Zhuowen out. The smile on Nailin Hongyu's face became more and more intense. Her beautiful eyes stared at Zhuowen with a sense of victory. It was as if she was telling Zhuowen that offending her would not end well. Zhuowen was too lazy to pay attention to this unruly, willful, and ignorant woman. Instead, he looked at the black-robed man, took a step forward, and said indifferently, Are you sure you want to drive me out? Then I can tell you clearly that the one who has a conflict with me is this bitch beside you. If you want to drive me out, then drive this bitch out as well. The smile on Nailin Hongyu's face instantly froze. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at Zhuowen as she said coldly, What did you just say about me? I dare you to say it again. I was only speaking the truth when I said you were a bitch, Zhuowen said indifferently. Nailin Hongyu almost went crazy when she heard this. Unfortunately, she didn't dare to go down and teach the young man a lesson because the strength he'd displayed just now was at least at the ultimate emperor realm. She was no match for him at all. You actually dare to insult a disciple of our Shenzhen's inner court in front of the Shenzhen mountain gate. You have really gone against the heavens. Men, capture this rebellious kid. If he resists, kill him on the spot. The black-robed man narrowed his eyes. His expression had become unsightly when he heard Jun call Nalin Hongyu a bitch. Bush, bush, bush. As soon as the black-robed man spoke, the Shenzhen disciples who were originally in charge of the stone tablet leaped up and surrounded Jun. The tips of their swords were pointed at Jun. Elder Bai frowned slightly and said, "Brother Nalin, there's no need to mobilize so many people. This kid did not do it on purpose. Let him go." Unfortunately, the black-robed man completely ignored Elder Bai. The black-robed man was much stronger than Elder Bai, and his status in the Shenzhen was much higher than Elder Bai's. So these Shenzhen disciples basically listened to the black-robed man. Chapter 809. One move, Nalin Hongyu hasn't become an inner disciple of Shenzhen yet, right? Could it be that I'm insulting all of you Shenzhen disciples? Zhuan said indifferently as he looked at the Shenzhen disciples surrounding him. Nalin Hongyu raised her chin high as the corners of her mouth curled up. She sneered, "I'll definitely become an inner disciple. Insulting me now is the same as provoking Shenzhen. Don't you think you deserve to die?" Hongyu is right. It's only a matter of time before she becomes an inner disciple. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to insult her? The black-robed man said coldly. Everyone looked at the young man surrounded by Shenzhen disciples. They shook their heads and sighed. They never thought that something like this would happen during the opening ceremony. This young man is really unlucky. With his talent, he could definitely become an inner disciple of Shenzhen. Unfortunately, everyone knew that the young man with peerless talent had offended Nalin Hongyu. Furthermore, Nalin Hongyu had a close relationship with the black-robed man. His chances of entering Shenzhen were completely ruined, and he might even have to pay the price of death. Do you regret it? There are some people that you can't afford to offend. However, it's useless for you to regret it now. Your talent is indeed not bad. Unfortunately, Shenzhen doesn't lack geniuses like you. Nalin Hongyu looked down at the young man from above. She assumed the posture of a victor. She wanted to see the young man in front of her reveal regret, anger, and other negative emotions. Unfortunately, the young man who was surrounded was extremely calm. His pair of indifferent eyes were like an unchanging stone statue. There wasn't the slightest hint of emotion in them. Putting on an act, huh? Second uncle, take down this rebellious fellow. Nalin Hongyu snorted coldly and said to the black-robed man beside her. The black-robed man nodded and waved his hand, "Take down this child. If he dares to resist, kill him immediately." The 20 Shenzhen disciples shouted in unison. They clenched their right hands, and sharp swords appeared in their hands. Then, they rushed toward Zhuan with great tacit understanding. Looking around indifferently at the incoming Glory Sect disciples, Zhuowen's face was expressionless. He waved his right hand, and a bone spear appeared in his palm. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuan turned into an illusory afterimage, instantly brushing past the encirclement. In the blink of an eye, the 20 Shenzhen disciples who were encircled suddenly stopped in their tracks. They were like statues, motionless in the air, looking extremely strange. 10 meters away from the encirclement, a tall and straight figure slowly landed on the ground. His hand was holding a bone spear at an angle. At the tip of the spear, drops of bright-colored flower-like blood trickled down. Plop, plop. Instantly, the 20 Shenzhen disciples who had stopped in their tracks fell to the ground. A deep red line appeared on their necks, and they were all dead. A spear to the throat. This. Everyone gasped as they stared at the 20 Shenzhen disciples who had fallen to the ground in disbelief. These 20 Shenzhen disciples had all been killed in one move? The black-robed man and Old Bai also stared blankly at the 20 Shenzhen disciples' corpses. They did not expect that 20 Shenzhen disciples would be killed just like that. These 20 Shenzhen disciples were all elite disciples of the Shenzhen. Their strength was around the level of the ultimate emperor realm, but now, they had been instantly killed by an ordinary youth. It was a little unbelievable. The smile on Nalin Hongyu's pretty face gradually faded. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at the 20 Shenzhen disciples who had been instantly killed. She could not help but mutter to herself, 20 Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivators were actually killed in an instant? Could it be my imagination? When she realized that it was not her imagination, the shock on Nalin Hongyu's face became even more intense. Even her delicate body could not help but tremble. How could this youth before her be so powerful? Originally, when this youth had instantly defeated the soldiers she had brought with her, she had thought that he was only a Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. Now, it seemed that she had greatly underestimated this youth's strength. Second uncle is still here. When the time comes, this kid will definitely be captured without a fight. Nalin Hongyu's heart only calmed down slightly when she glanced at the black-robed man beside her. After all, the black-robed man was an elder of the Shenzhen, and his strength had reached the Ultimate Emperor realm. Nalin Hongyu did not believe that this youth before her could be stronger than the black-robed man. You dare to kill my Shenzhen disciples? The black-robed man's eyes widened as he roared angrily. He stared fixedly at Zhuan, as if he wanted to devour him. You ordered them to kill me, so why can't I kill them? Zhuan sneered. He raised his head slightly and stared at the black-robed man with a mocking smile on his face. Who do you think you are? It's only right for our Shenzhen to kill you, but for you to kill our Shenzhen disciples, you deserve to die 1,000 times over. Today, you killed 20 of our Shenzhen's elite disciples, so you can stay here forever. The black-robed man snorted coldly, and a terrifying aura erupted from him. His black robe fluttered even though there was no wind, and a strong wind whistled around his body. Elder Nalin is going to attack. I'm afraid this kid is in for it. Elder Nalin's status in Shenzhen is quite high, and his cultivation is above the Ultimate Emperor realm. He is also one of the strongest in Shenzhen. This youth has killed 20 Shenzhen disciples. This is a disaster. Shenzhen is the holy land of martial arts in this world. This kid is simply courting death by killing Shenzhen's disciples. Many people were shocked when they sensed the sharp killing intent emitted from the black-robed man's body. Their gazes toward Zhuan were filled with pity and regret. Originally, I just wanted to drive you out of Shenzhen. Unfortunately, not only did you not listen, you even insulted our Shenzhen disciples. And now, you are even more ruthless. You killed 20 of our Shenzhen disciples. You deserve to die 1,000 times over. No one can save you today. The black-robed man stood in the air, looking majestic. He looked down at Zhuan, and his voice was like thunder rolling out. Nalin Hongyu's face flushed red. Her second uncle was finally going to attack. This young man in front of her was definitely going to die. Deserve to die 1,000 times over? Then you can try. Zhuan pointed the tip of the bone spear at the black-robed man and said provocatively. As soon as these words came out, it caused an uproar. No one had expected this kid to dare to provoke the black-robed man at this juncture. Was he not courting death? Since you want to die so much, I will fulfill your wish. The black-robed man was so angry that he laughed. He put his palms together and a terrifying origin energy gathered in the void behind him. The origin energy surged out and turned into a huge black blade. Absolute black blade. With a low shout, the black-robed man took a step in the void and swooped down. He rushed toward Zhuan with the huge black blade. Elder Nalin has used his strongest move, Absolute Black Blade. It seems that he wants to kill this young man in front of him with one move. Looking at the huge black blade that appeared beside the black-robed man, many people's eyes were filled with astonishment. Absolute Black Blade was the black-robed man's ultimate move. Many people were quite familiar with it. Slightly raising his head, Zhuan's eyes were still as calm as an ancient well. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuan suddenly rushed up to the sky. The bone spear in his right hand shook, and a mysterious power of essence burst out. In an instant, Zhuan and the black-robed man passed by each other as if they were strangers. There was no fierce confrontation, nor was there a hot-blooded collision. They just passed by each other calmly. Then, everyone's pupils shrank as they found that the black-robed man's absolute black blade had completely shattered into countless black fragments in front of everyone's eyes. The black-robed man spat out a mouthful of blood. His whole body was like a withered butterfly as he flew backward. His eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. Even the black-robed man did not expect that his absolute black blade would be broken so easily. Moreover, it was not fancy at all. Boom! The black-robed man hit the ground dozens of meters away and spat out another mouthful of blood. His aura was extremely weak. Silence. At this moment, the whole area fell into an eerie silence. Regardless of whether it was the onlookers or Nalen Hongyu and Old Bai on the mountain gate, they were all stunned on the spot. Their gazes were all gathered on the miserable figure who had fallen to the ground and spat out blood dozens of meters away. Disbelief filled almost everyone's faces. The black-robed man, who was also the elder of Shenzhen, was an expert whose strength was above the ultimate emperor stage. Now, he was fighting an ordinary youth and had been defeated in a single blow. When everyone realized that what was happening in front of them was not an illusion, the sound of people sucking in cold air could not help but resound one after another. No one was more shocked than Nalen Hongyu. At this moment, Nalen Hongyu was stunned on the spot. Her beautiful eyes stared at the defeated black-robed man as her delicate body trembled. How is this possible? Second uncle is an ultimate emperor stage expert. How could he have been defeated by this kid? This is impossible. It must be an illusion. Yes, it must be an illusion. Old Bai's mouth was slightly agape, but his heart was extremely shocked. The strength of the youth before him had already exceeded his imagination. Even the black-robed man had been defeated in a single blow. Elder Nalen, the person you want to drive away is a true monstrous genius. It's not worth it to offend such a genius. Old Bai shook his head and a trace of pity appeared in his eyes. The youth before him was too terrifying. If the black-robed man had not interfered and insisted on driving him out of Shenzhen, this kid would have already become an inner disciple of Shenzhen. Unfortunately, fate made fools of people. Now, because of the black-robed man, it was not very likely that this kid would be able to enter Shenzhen. When he thought of this, Old Bai was extremely uncomfortable with the black-robed man's actions. Unfortunately, his status was not as high as the black-robed man's, and he did not have the right to speak as well. There was nothing he could do. Whoosh! You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.